Hello everyone. We hope you're doing well. We're doing great, and we truly appreciate your ongoing support. We'd like to briefly address some comments regarding our audiobook series. Rest assured, progress is ongoing. That said, your feedback is vital. If there's a novel you particularly enjoy and want to hear more of, please let us know in the comments. Each chapter requires a financial investment, so we can only continue series that receive strong audience interest. Although we retain core names and plot lines, we make significant editorial changes to enhance clarity, pacing, and immersion. These are not simple recitations. We work hard to deliver a polished, thoughtful listening experience. Without sufficient feedback or engagement, we may need to discontinue a series. So if you're enjoying something, don't stay silent. Your input truly matters. Note, our default audio speed is 3x. If that's too fast, let us know. We're happy to adjust it. Interested in early access to unreleased audiobooks? Visit our Patreon. You'll get to experience new content before it reaches YouTube. Just to clarify, I'm a fan like you. I've purchased these novels and adapted them with care, while respecting all rights and guidelines. For updates, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, X. YouTube update: recently, YouTube flagged some of our content for including mature themes, realistic violence, and darker story elements. As a result, we've decided to stop uploading anything that violates YouTube's guidelines. If you'd like access to the full, uncut versions including the more intense or mature content, you can find them on our Patreon page, where we upload everything first. Available now on Patreon: Shattered Innocence transmigrated into a novel as an extra. Transmigrating over 10,000 years late, I was forced to become a mighty presence. I, the celestial dragon, rule the heavens through the double gate, reigning supreme in countless worlds with peace taming, Tower of God sequence strength, cultivation when you take things to the extreme. Naruto is an Uchiha with cyst. WTF, the centuries-old ancestor in our family take concubine again. Plus 18, Ichi, reincarnated in Bleach as a wizard. Thanks for listening and happy listening. Chapter 1, 1179 AD, Late Autumn. Kair Moorhead, Apprentice Training Ground. Alan, what are you daydreaming about? The stern reprimand snapped Alan out of his reverie. A middle-aged man wearing a wide-brimmed black hat was glaring at him with golden cat-like eyes. Sorry, Master Visumr. Alan apologized properly. I just got distracted. Upon hearing the apology, Visumr nodded and glanced at the four apprentices sitting cross-legged around him, then continued his lecture. Apprentices, when dealing with drowners, your silver sword is always your best friend. Pure monster knowledge was dull, and Visumr's teaching style for monsterology was very straightforward. Before long, Alan's mind wandered again. Alan was a transmigrant from Blue Star. His original name was Linai, 30 years old, an orphan. Before his transmigration, he was a middle management employee in a company. The title of middle management sounded prestigious, but in reality, he was just a scapegoat for the executives and a pawn for the higher-ups. Before soul transmigrating to the Witcher world, Linai had just been promoted and spent 4 sleepless nights finalizing a big project. Smoothly, the fruits of his labor were reaped by a mascot who had parachuted into the team a week earlier. This mascot, whose background was unknown, was busy watching movies and reading novels in the office, and his rank was promoted 2 levels. Linai and his team, having no background, each received a cup of milk tea as hush money and had to fake smiles to thank the boss for the gesture. After all, with the mascot's double promotion, he replaced the retiring old leader and became their new superior. Linai had grown accustomed to such grievances. But what he never expected was that the cup of 12 yuan milk tea from the mascot would transmigrate him to the Witcher world. One moment he was tasting industrial saccharin, the next he was swallowing a stinky, bitter, and viscous herbal potion. What followed was the agony of muscle spasms and dissolving pain all over his body, along with an influx of memory that made his brain feel like it was exploding. Recalling the painful memories from 3 days ago, Linai shivered instinctively. Although he had cleared the game The Witcher 3 inches during his leisure time, Alan never imagined becoming a Witcher one day. The trial of the grasses with over a 50% mortality rate is next month, Alan sighed inwardly. As Alan pondered how to survive in this dangerous world, a cold mechanical voice suddenly sounded, and a blood-red transparent panel appeared before him. Witcher's memoir activated. Hunting monsters can earn rewards. The stronger the monster, the greater the reward. Acquired special skill, Witcher level 1. Since transmigration happened, having a system doesn't seem that strange, Alan thought. The panel had only one option: character. Following the received information, Alan activated the character panel with a thought. Name: Alan. Age: 13. Title: Child of Miracle. Level: 1. Health: 100%. Stamina: 52 out of 52. Attributes: Strength 5.1, Agility 5.3, Constitution 5.2, Perception 6.9, Mystery 3.1, Special Skill, Witcher Level 1, Skill, Wolf School Two-Handed Sword Level 1, 0 out of 100, Evaluation, Weak, Special Skills will only upgrade with character level, Witcher, Active, consumes 50 stamina, concentrates spirit to enter Witcher state, meeting conditions triggers a fatal strike, guaranteed to kill the monster, Alan, Weak? Is this panel mocking me? After some inner grumbling, Alan silently closed the panel. The system seemed good, and the given Witcher skill looked quite powerful. But there was a crucial issue. Where to find monsters? Alan had just passed the Trial of the Grasses 3 days ago, with the Trial of the Mountains a month away. In this month, he couldn't even leave Kaer Morhen's gate. Where would he find monsters to hunt? Alan. You're daydreaming again. Vesemir slammed his copy of Drowners and Swamp Hags shut. This lesson couldn't continue. Of the 4 apprentices, 3 were daydreaming. The last apprentice wasn't daydreaming but wasn't paying attention either. His small body was hiding behind Alan, almost nodding off. What was he thinking? Sleeping in this place? The apprentice training ground was right beside the main road to the castle. Even if he couldn't see, didn't other Witchers notice? Very well. It seems you no longer need to learn about Drowners. Let's proceed to practical combat. Vesemir shouted to his side, Litho. Nearby, a Witcher leaning against the castle wall, arms crossed, nodded and pulled the black cloth off a cage beside him. Inside the cage, a blue-skinned humanoid creature with dorsal fins screamed as sudden sunlight hit it. A Drowner. As soon as the cloth was removed, Vesemir and Litho's wolf medallions began to hum violently. Rejoice, apprentices. Vesemir pressed his medallion and continued, having just completed the Trial of the Grasses, you get to face a monster safely, a privilege only wolf school apprentices enjoy. Those cat school scum only teach their apprentices to kill each other and to miserably dig out the last coin from a dead man's stinking boot. Apparently satisfied with his rhetoric and having dissed the competition, Vesemir's gaze softened toward the apprentices. He handed Alan a steel sword and old apprentice leather armor. Come on, Alan, put on the armor, grip your sword, and show me if your arrogance matches your strength. Alan had no time to argue as the other apprentices quickly stuffed him into the leather armor. In a daze, his feet were soon on the sandy training ground. A crowd surrounded the training ground. They were passing by adult Witchers curious about the commotion. Ready, Alan? Just as Alan was about to speak, he heard the familiar mechanical voice. Ding, main quest discovered, beginning of the Witcher's path, kill 1 Drowner, 0 out of 1. He swallowed back his words of defense. It's just a Drowner, nothing to fear, Alan thought. He gripped the steel sword, took a deep breath, and nodded firmly at Vesemir. Ready. Very well. Vesemir uncharacteristically smiled. At that moment, Witcher Litho, pushing the cage, arrived beside Vesemir. Vesemir opened the cage, slightly sidestepped to avoid the Drowner's pounce, and made a quick hand gesture with his right hand. Ard sign. This was one of the Witcher's 6 magical signs, a kinetic blast used to push, stun, or knock down opponents, and to break obstacles. Under the visible shockwave, the ugly creature rolled like a ball to Alan's feet. The Drowner, shrieking, hadn't yet risen. Alan gripped the steel sword, intending to strike while it was down. At that moment, Vesemir's voice suddenly came to his ear. First mistake, weapon. I just taught that a silver sword is always your best partner against Drowners. Alan? Didn't you just give me this steel sword? Chapter 2. Upon hearing Vesemir's words, Alan was stunned for a moment. He subconsciously stopped in his tracks and looked at the sword in his hand. Although it was a training sword for apprentices, with a plain hilt and guard, the blade had no nicks and was polished to a mirror finish. A good sword, but not a silver sword. Alan thought back. In the game, when fighting Drowners, he indeed used a silver sword, but it was automatically switched. So, using a steel sword wouldn't kill Drowners? Our apprentice is very confident, having just passed the Trial of the Grasses, he dares to challenge Drowners with a steel sword. Vesemir sarcastically commented, then said in a deep voice, remember, Apprentice Alan, if you lose, I will have you polish every sword in Kaer Morhen until they shine. Before his brain could react, his ears caught the key words. Alan instinctively replied, what if I win? Vesemir was taken aback by the question, muttering, if you win? He didn't expect this apprentice to be so bold, not only daydreaming in his class. With a monster right in front of him, he still had the courage to challenge him, a master Witcher. At that moment, Vesemir even suspected that Alan wasn't intentionally provoking him, but that the Trial of the Grasses had fried his brain. Yeah. What if he wins? Litho, standing beside Vesemir, chimed in mischievously. Ha ha, yeah, Vesemir, what if our apprentice wins? This was echoed by over a dozen Witcher companions watching. Vesemir was cornered. His face turned red as he instinctively drew the steel sword from his back and shouted at Alan, "If you win, this sword in my hand will be yours." As soon as he finished speaking, the training ground erupted. Litho, standing next to Visamur, gaped in shock. "Are you crazy? This is your Elsa, a master dwarven work worth 17,325 orans. You even borrowed 3,000 dorans from me to get this silver sword." Visamur's face darkened, holding the steel sword in front of him. The bright and transparent blade clearly showed the owner's meticulous care, with a hollow dot guard and a silver-white blade that seemed sharp enough to cut skin just by looking at it. Obviously, Visamur had drawn the wrong sword. The steel sword worth over 300 orans still sat obediently in its scabbard on his back. The apprentices didn't understand what 17,325 orans meant, having never left Kaer Morhen since they could remember. But the surrounding witchers knew. Upon hearing that number, the training ground erupted. 17,325 orans? I worked hard on contracts this year and only saved 500 orans. That's pretty good. I didn't make any money this year and ended up in the hole by 234 orans due to injuries and equipment repairs. No wonder he's the youngest master witcher in nearly a century. Visamur's heart bled. If there were only a few apprentices, he could have easily said he grabbed the wrong one. But now, he was figuratively lifted from the castle tower of Kaer Morhen to the clouds perpetually floating above the blue mountains. On those white clouds, in fancy script, it read, "The youngest master witcher in a century." There was no backing down. Then he has to win. Visamur said stubbornly, "Just went through the trial of the grasses, hasn't learned any signs, and is even using a steel sword against a drowner. If he wins, what harm in giving him a sword?" The other witchers didn't take Visamur's promise seriously. Drowners were the most common monsters, and each of them had killed no less than 100. They knew the difficulty of fighting with just a steel sword. That apprentice couldn't possibly win. In the apprentice training ground, Alan, who had asked the question, felt a bit nervous. He had just instinctively responded out of habit. But things had escalated, and from Visamur's stern face, it was clear he wouldn't accept any explanation until Alan lost the fight. From Visamur to the apprentices and the watching witchers, everyone thought he would lose. However, Alan didn't think so. As he focused his mind, he seemed to see some sort of aura around the monster. In the corner of his vision, the icon of the Monster Hunt skill flashed, its color gradually turning from white to red. Monster Hunt, progress 9%. The web claw cut through the air, straight towards Alan's face. A rotting, muddy stench assaulted his senses, making him nauseous. Alan stared intently at the drowner's body, stepping back with his right foot, dodging the drowner's right claw, then following his body's memory, spinning and slashing at the drowner's back. Seeing Alan's smooth attack, Visamur's displeasure slightly lessened, and he commented to the apprentices, "That's right, spinning is the essence of wolf school swordsmanship. Imagine yourself as a long whip, spinning brings speed and power." Alan's moves are very standard, but unfortunately, the sleepy apprentice who had just woken up didn't hear the rest, rubbing his eyes and asking, "Unfortunately what?" Visamur glanced at the apprentice and ignored him. However, the apprentices no longer needed Visamur's answer. The sharp steel sword, carrying the power of the spin, cut into the drowner's back like it was slicing through greased leather, leaving a shallow scratch before sliding off the monster's smooth back into the air. The feel of the strike is strange, Alan thought. He felt the blade cut through something, not the monster's skin, but something invisible, like gelatin. It's chaotic magic. As if knowing what Alan was thinking, Visamur's voice came from behind. Chaotic magic protects all beings favored by it. Only silver, which represents order, can bypass this protection. Immediately after, Visamur's tone softened a bit as he continued, "In light of your practiced swordsmanship, you can switch to a silver sword." "And a bet?" That was Litho, the Witcher. "Of course not." The Master Witcher rolled his eyes, giving Litho an annoyed look. "I want to try again," Alan replied. Visamur didn't speak. The Witchers watching also fell silent. After a while, some even left the training ground with a bit of disappointment. Alan didn't see this. He was staring at the blue body of the drowner slowly getting up. But Alan could imagine what the onlookers thought, greedy, overestimating himself. Indeed, under normal circumstances, he should have given up. An attack that couldn't break through the defense would be difficult to say whether the monster would tire out first or Alan would. But the key point was, Alan's situation was not normal. On the surface, the previous strike not only did little damage but also almost caused Alan to lose balance after using his full strength. But actually, Monster Hunt, progress 63%. Go, Alan. The sleepy apprentice who had previously hidden behind Alan shouted loudly. His name was Hughes, 2 years younger than Alan, and was the only friend the original Alan had in Kaer Morhen. Alan just nodded without saying anything. because the Drowner was charging at him again. Alan didn't retreat but advanced, stepping forward and slashing again, still not breaking through. But... ding! Monster Hunt 100% time froze at this moment, and everything around turned into a still painting. In the painting, the Drowner's bloodshot eyes, its bared fangs, and the yellow saliva stringing between them. A red line suddenly appeared in the center. A strong intuition guided Alan to slash along this line. So, the sharp blade, like a child's brush, followed the red line, cutting lightly through the painting. The Drowner's neck happened to appear at the end of the red line. As if it knew the painting needed a certain color to be complete, it willingly offered itself. Splurt, the painting moved, with black, foul blood spraying from the Drowner's neck. Thud, Alan's exhausted body fell onto the headless corpse. At the same time, a mechanical sound came to his ear. Ding! Monster Drowner defeated, reward calculation, Alan. Hughes shouted anxiously. Visamr. Quick! Before Litho reminded him, Visamr rushed over. Then, about half a meter away from Alan, he stopped. Looking at Alan's slowly rising figure, then at the headless Drowner, Visamr was surprised. My apprentice. Actually won. Chapter 3, Monster Drowner Level 2 defeated, Reward Settlement, Victory, Basic Rating D, Higher Level Kill +1, D+, Decapitation Intimidation +3, C+, Main Quest +3, B+, Final Rating, B+, Loot obtained, Drowner's Heart Essence, Small Experience Speed 10, Drowner's Chest 4, Main Quest completed, The Beginning of the Monster Hunter's Path, Kill Drowner 1 out of 1, Reward obtained, Identification Skill Level 1, the influx of information made Alan's mind ring like a school bell, with a constant ding-ding-ding. Coupled with the fact that the monster hunting skill instantly drained his stamina. Alan's vision went black, and he collapsed onto the Drowner's corpse. He only managed to stand up again after about 10 seconds. The Master Witcher's indifferent face was just a step away. This must be revenge, Alan thought. The center of the training ground was only about 8 or 9 meters from the edge. With the Master Witcher's abilities, he could have reached Alan before he collapsed on the corpse. But Visamr did not. Alan. How did you do it? A surprised voice came from beside him. Alan and Visamr both looked at the speaker, Litho. Litho was holding the Drowner's head, looking incredulous. Killing a Drowner with a steel sword as an apprentice was nearly impossible in itself. And the method of killing was decapitation. The Drowner's skin, muscle, and bones were all protected by chaotic magic. Only a silver sword could weaken or even ignore these protections. A steel sword? Decapitation? This method was something not even an experienced Witcher like Litho could accomplish. The onlookers gathered around Alan and the headless Drowner's body were equally shocked by Alan's prowess. The headless corpse was still gushing blood. Noticing the astonished expressions around him, Alan finally understood the gravity of his accomplishment. But at the same time, he was also plunged into another dilemma: how to explain Litho's question. Just as Alan was frantically thinking, racking his brains for an excuse, a deep voice came to his rescue. Litho, Witchers are not all the same. The Witchers surrounding Alan and the headless Drowner made way for the source of the voice. In the early experimental records of the school, it is noted that apprentices who undergo a perfect mutation during the trial of the grasses have a slight chance of awakening the Witcher's eye. Those who possess it can see the flow of chaotic magic within a monster's body. Seeing the identity of the newcomer, the Witchers all lowered their heads slightly and greeted him, Chief. Good morning, Chief. The man called Chief nodded in response. He had long black hair and pale gray skin. His rare gray cat eyes seemed to contain the eternal snow of the Blue Mountains. This was a man as imposing as Kaer Morhen itself. Although it was a bit strange, this was Alan's first impression of him. But the Witcher's eye, which could see the flow of chaotic magic. Did the game have such a setting? The Chief nodded appreciatively at Alan and then glanced at the ghastly head in Litho's hand, saying calmly, Litho, even after passing the trial of the mountains, you must not stop your studies. Litho's forehead instantly broke out in a cold sweat, and he repeatedly agreed, looking like a poor student being questioned by a teacher. Yes, Chief, I'll head to the library right after teaching these apprentices. Visamr? Aren't the apprentices taught by me? No problem, Litho. I'll handle the apprentices. You can go ahead, Visamr said expressionlessly. Litho. Revenge, isn't it? Seeing the Chief looking over again, Litho hurriedly changed the topic. Visamr, wasn't there an agreement between you and Alan? As soon as he spoke, nearly 20 pairs of eyes focused on Visamr's face. Visamr's mouth twitched involuntarily. Seeing the spotlight turning to him, Alan quickly refused. No need, it was just a joke earlier. Visamr's expression improved greatly upon hearing Alan's words. He unclasped the sword buckle on his armor, and along with the scabbard, he slowly drew out the Elsa silver sword from the sword bag, looked at it reluctantly for a moment, then handed it to Alan, saying to the apprentices, "Apprentices, let me teach you another lesson. Wolf School witchers value their promises more than their lives." The powerful voice echoed in the great castle, sounding particularly firm. "You speak quite grandly." Alan thought, it would be more convincing if your hand didn't tremble while handing over the sword. Now it was the apprentices who were in a dilemma. "Take it, apprentice." The chief's deep voice rang out, startling everyone. Witchers' promises were indeed more important than their lives, but a sufficient amount of orange was equally valuable to a witcher's life. Monster hunting was a life-risking job. Moreover, this was 17,325 orans. So they were only cheering before Alan killed the drowner. Litho, known for speaking without thinking, must be regretting it now. But why did the chief say such a thing? Seeing Alan not moving, the chief didn't mind and continued speaking to Visamr. "Visamr, after the trial of the mountains, you and Alan will take on contracts together. Within 5 years, forge a custom silver sword for him that is comparable to this one, and exchange it back for your own sword. Can you do that?" Visamr had no objections. Forging a suitable weapon required more than just money. The search for materials, the cooperation of craftsmen, and even a bit of luck during the forging process were needed to get a satisfactory weapon. To others, Elsa might be worth 17,325 orans. But to him, it was worth much more. Moreover, promises were more important than life. He had intended to give the sword to Alan anyway. "Of course," Visamr nodded, then said to Alan, "Take it." Seeing this, Alan had no choice but to accept Elsa. The sheathed silver sword was almost as tall as he was. In front of Visamr, Alan carefully cradled the sword in his arms, avoiding the scabbard scraping the ground. Then, following Visamr's signal, he walked with the others out of the training ground. By the fence outside the training ground, Litho had, at some point, moved the other cages covered with black cloth. "All right, apprentices, let's continue our practical lesson. Who's next?" No one responded. Visamr looked down, puzzled, at the 3 apprentices. Seeing them all hesitating to step forward, he asked, "What's wrong?" After hesitating for a long time, Hughes, the sleepyhead, timidly poked his head out, glanced longingly at the Elsa in Alan's arms, and asked, "If we win, can we get a silver sword too?" The other 2 little heads also looked expectantly at Visamr. Visamr? Chapter 4, Alan avoided Visamr's complicated gaze. Pretending not to notice anything, he lowered his head and studied the patterns on Elsa's scabbard. He looked as if the patterns contained the secrets of the universe. Turning his gaze back, Visamr looked at the future of the Wolf School with a headache. Platinum, dark red, emerald green. 3 pairs of round cat eyes were glued to Visamr's face. The school never said I had to teach the apprentices out of my own pocket, Visamr thought. The probability of a second apprentice being able to kill a drowner with a steel sword was nearly 0. But what if he didn't have a second Elsa? As for breaking the oath, even the witchers of the cat school wouldn't be that dishonorable. Before he could come up with a solution, the chief spoke. "Of course. As long as you kill a drowner with a steel sword, my silver sword will be yours." "But there's only one," Hughes asked innocently, "and there are 3 of us." The chief smiled and said, "Naturally, whoever kills it first will get it." Hughes wanted to ask more. The other apprentices were already scrambling to stand before Visamr. Visamr breathed a sigh of relief and nodded gratefully at the chief, then arranged the order. If it weren't for the chief's intervention, he might have pulled out Litho's silver sword. The farce ended, and the practical lesson resumed its course. Seeing everyone's attention back on the training ground, Alan let out a sigh of relief and silently muttered, "Panel." The translucent panel unfolded, and a whole row of system messages appeared. Looking at the reward settlement details, Alan felt a sense of déjà vu, as if he were back in his past life, playing a game and seeing the dungeon settlement screen. Materials, experience feeds, and chests, this felt like a third-rate game. Recalling things from Earth, Alan sighed. The life of a corporate drone was exhausting, but at least it was safe. Living in the world of a witcher, who knew what awaited tomorrow? Monsters? Sorceresses? Or a pitchfork stabbed from behind? Shivering, Alan focused his mind and returned his attention to the panel. Although he didn't know how the monster hunting system determined the drowner's level, the reward settlement content gave him some clues. Alan could roughly judge that a monster hunt evaluation started with a basic assessment of whether the monster was killed. Then, additional points were awarded based on the level difference between the monster and Alan, the method of killing, and the completion of the quest. The final amount of loot was related to the overall evaluation. However, the drowner's heart essence? What was it for? Do you want to use drowner's heart essence? A prompt box popped up with Alan's thoughts. Alan? Can it be used directly? With some hesitation, Alan thought for a few seconds and chose to use it. Instantly, A cold liquid flowed down his throat and into his esophagus. A warm current surged from his stomach, spreading throughout his body through his blood vessels. The fatigue from fighting the drowner vanished in an instant. His physical state felt as if he had returned to before the battle. No. It was even better than before the battle. With a thought, he opened his character panel. Name, Alan, age, 13, title, Child of Miracles, level, 1, HP, 94%, stamina, 54 out of 54, attributes, strength 5.2, plus 0.1, agility 5.3, constitution 5.4, plus 0.2, perception 6.9, mystery 3.1, special skills, monster hunting level 1, identification level 1, skills, wolf school two-handed sword level 1, 0 out of 100, evaluation, weak, yes. Both strength and constitution had increased. Alan looked closely again, confirming that the increase in strength and constitution was not an illusion. Although it was only a 0.3 increase, drowners were the most common monsters in this world. For witchers of any school, the first commission they received was 90% likely to be these ugly creatures. A single drowner increased 0.3 points in attributes, 10 would increase 3 points. And there were thousands upon thousands of drowners in this world. Killing 20 or 30 drowners, would the trial of the mountains still be a challenge? Thinking of the trial of the mountains, Alan felt like a bucket of cold water had been poured over him, quickly calming him down. An apprentice who couldn't leave Kaer Morhen, what use were thousands of drowners in the world? However, the tangible increase in attributes still made Alan see a glimmer of hope in the face of the death threat posed by the trial of the mountains. Continuing to look further, Alan noticed that his experience in the wolf school two-handed sword had not increased at all. Was it because the skill use time was too short, or could it only be improved using small experience speeds? The monster hunting system did not respond. Thinking about it, Alan thought, of course, after all, the original body practiced the two-handed sword for nearly 10 years to reach level 1. In just a moment, how could there be any change? After thinking for a moment, Alan did not dwell on it and continued to sort through his gains. Using 10 small experience speeds consecutively, the wolf school two-handed sword leveled up directly. All the muscles in his body twitched slightly, and new knowledge appeared in his mind. In a trance, Alan felt as if he had been trained by a master witcher for 2 years and had undergone a year of practical combat. His overall coordination and efficiency in using strength improved significantly. At the same time, the character level on the panel also increased by 1. Ah! A scream interrupted Alan's reflection. He looked up. Not far away, a steel sword lay quietly on the ground. The first apprentice had failed. Hueco, with a blank expression, carried him towards Alan. The apprentice's face, dirtied by dust, was full of unwillingness and disbelief. His right arm hung limply, likely dislocated. Alan, Hughes nervously picked at the small stones on the ground, asking somewhat hesitantly, "How did you do it earlier?" Alan was about to brush it off when Vesemir called out, "Next, Bond." Looking in the direction of the voice, Alan saw Vesemir toying with the drowner. Yes, toying. The steel sword remained sheathed. Vesemir used only his footwork to dodge the drowner's attacks, steadily holding its aggro. A true master witcher, Alan thought. Then, an idea struck him, and he used his identification skill on Vesemir. Name, Vesemir, attributes, strength 46, agility 57, constitution 65, perception 70, mystery 41. What kind of monster was this, to be so terrifying? Alan couldn't help but gasp. The lowest attribute, strength, was 46, 9 times Alan's. Remember, Alan, though only 13, had undergone the trial of the grasses, making his physical attributes comparable to, if not surpassing, those of a regular adult in his previous life, even stronger than his overworked, often drinking past self. Amazed, Alan scanned a few more witchers. Name, Hueco, attributes, strength 28, agility 34, constitution 57, perception 61, mystery 15. The attributes of adult witchers were similar to Hueco's. The lowest attribute among them was strength, which was above 20. Are witchers in the game this strong? Alan pondered. With such strong attributes, how could any witcher be killed by a farmer's pitchfork? Chapter 5, Awe. Another scream rang out. The second apprentice, Bond, was also taken down by Hueco. Alan saw it clearly this time. Bond struck the drowner twice, but each time failed to penetrate its defense. In his panic, a simple spinning slash move made his feet seem like they were tied in knots. He staggered awkwardly, almost tripping himself. The drowner seized the opportunity, swatting away Bond's steel sword with one swipe and lunging at his exposed side. Bang! Bond was instantly knocked to the ground by the drowner, his right arm hitting the ground and fracturing. Next, Alan saw Visama rush over and kick the drowner away. Litho then picked up the apprentice and carried him to the side of the training field. As Bond hit the ground, the surrounding Witchers collectively exhaled in relief. "This is normal. I almost thought the formula for the trial of the grasses had changed," remarked a Witcher in a grey cloak, leaning against the wooden railing. "The Grandmaster mentioned something about Witcher's eye, right?" responded a blonde Witcher with his arms crossed. "It's Witcher's vision. Do you want to go to the library?" The Witcher in the grey cloak raised an eyebrow and said softly. The blonde Witcher, hearing this, quickly uncrossed his arms, glanced sneakily at the Grandmaster watching from the wall, and shook his head, saying, "What Witcher has time to go to the library? With that time, it's better to properly polish the sword." Then, seeming to take an interest in Alan, the blonde Witcher glanced at Alan's eyes and asked the Witcher in the grey cloak, "Is the Witcher's vision really that powerful? Have you heard of it before?" "No matter how I look at it, this apprentice's eyes seem ordinary, just a pair of blue cat eyes." Without turning his head, the grey-cloaked Witcher replied, "So, you think the Grandmaster is lying?" "Of course not. I'm just curious, just curious." The blonde Witcher shook his head repeatedly, quickly changing the topic to the next apprentice stepping into the field. Listening to the discussions around him, Alan breathed a sigh of relief. Though being the center of attention like a rare animal was uncomfortable, it was a small price to pay for the disguise granted by the system. However, it seemed he needed to check the library for records of the Witcher's vision to prevent any future slip-ups. "The last one, Hughes." Visama's voice rang out. Hughes jolted, glanced at the miserable states of the first two apprentices, and hesitantly stood up. He took the steel sword from Litho and walked towards Visama. In the training field, Visama, seeing Hughes approach, sidestepped the drowner's attack easily and walked towards the edge of the field without looking back. Drowners, being brainless monsters, only attacked the closest enemy in sight. As long as the timing was right and the apprentice approached, the drowner's attention would naturally shift. Drowners are indeed the best choice for practical lessons. Visama thought to himself. Suddenly, Visama's keen senses picked up hurried footsteps behind him. Just as he was about to turn around, an unexpected figure appeared to his left, the Witcher apprentice, Hughes. "Visama?" A thought flashed through his mind instantly. The apprentice ran off, so where's the drowner he was facing? Visama quickly turned around. The drowner was already so close that Visama could smell its foul breath. In a moment of urgency, Visama instinctively extended his right hand, swiftly making a sign towards the drowner. Ard sign. A powerful blast of telekinetic force kicked up a cloud of dust in the training field. The drowner's blue, slimy skin rippled like a lake in a storm, then crashed through the wooden barriers of the training field, sending dust and wood fragments flying towards the meditating Grandmaster of the Wolf School leaning against the wall. Moments later, the dust settled. Alan saw the drowner hanging lifelessly against the wall. The Grandmaster remained unharmed, his red gambson seemingly untouched by dust or debris. "Hughes. What are you doing?" Visama shouted. A pale yellow glow formed a spherical protective shield around him. Yes, after the Ard sign, Visama had cast a Ken sign in an instant. This sign formed a magical shield around the Witcher, absorbing physical damage. Alan watched clearly as Visama cast two signs in less than a second. A brilliant display of sign application. Yet, Visama wasn't pleased, his face was grim. The Witchers outside the apprentice training field fell silent. They had all seen the Witcher apprentice Hughes flee in terror after just one strike from the drowner, who was still 2 or 3 steps away. "I want to switch to a silver sword." Hughes cowered behind Alan. Visama, exasperated, dispelled the Ken shield. "What's wrong with this batch of apprentices? If you want to switch to a silver sword, just say it. Running off without a word, what's that supposed to mean?" With the drowner hanging lifelessly on the wall, Visama opened another cage. Sidestepping the attack, he made a sign, "Ard." The drowner was smoothly pushed to the center of the field by the telekinetic force. Following Alan's lead, Hughes struck while the drowner was unsteady. Charging, spinning, slashing. Cowardly imitating Alan exactly. Swish, a silver light flashed. Black-red blood gushed like thick sludge from the drowner's back. Impressive, Alan. Preemptive strikes indeed work wonders. Hughes admired Alan in his heart. Although Alan often daydreamed during lessons, his multitasking ability from his previous life allowed him not to miss a single detail. His familiarity with the drowner's attack patterns and countermeasures showed in the fight. This, along with his proficient sword skills, was why Visama allowed him to switch swords midway. Hughes, however, had listened to nothing, sleeping behind Alan for most of the lesson. Therefore, even with a silver sword, he cautiously mimicked Alan's successful demonstration. One effective strike, Hughes didn't retreat, mimicking Alan's raised silver sword, ready to decapitate the drowner. Unexpectedly, The heavily injured drowner didn't weaken but instead accelerated suddenly. "Watch out!" Alan shouted. Hughes, hearing this, instinctively took a step back, dodging the drowner's claws. Then he slashed downward. The blade sliced through, and the drowner's head flew off. "That strike wasn't bad," Litho commented. "But it's not worth 17,325 orans." Vesemir glared at Litho. Without changing his equipment, Hughes hurried over, looking gratefully at Alan. "Alan, thank you for earlier." If not for Alan's warning, Hughes's face would have been scarred. Alan nodded. "You're welcome, we're friends." Given the encouragement when no one else trusted him, Alan felt obliged to look after Hughes. After Hughes dealt with the drowner, the practical lesson for the day was over. Vesemir directed the remaining able-bodied apprentices to clean up the training field. Litho patted an unused cage and asked, "Vesemir, what should we do with the remaining 3 drowners?" "We won't need them for tomorrow's sign lesson." "Just get rid of them," Vesemir said dismissively. Drowners were plentiful, they could catch more if needed. "All right, then Litho shrugged, ready to remove the cage. "Wait. Let me take care of these 3 drowners." Chapter 6, Leave them to you? "Yes, leave them to me." Hearing Alan's confident reply, Litho and Vesemir exchanged puzzled looks. "What do you want with the drowners?" Vesemir asked, confused. Alan replied, "I want to try facing 3 at once, dealing with multiple drowners at the same time." "Oh, it seems someone doesn't want his injured companions to feel lonely and is looking for an opportunity to join them." Litho raised an eyebrow, smiling at Alan. "Are you sure about this, Witcher apprentice? There's no 17,325 orans silver sword bet this time." "Litho." Vesemir glared at Litho and earnestly advised Alan, "With your current skills, you are not ready to handle 3 drowners at once." After a brief pause, Vesemir continued, "Even if you have the Witcher's Eye. But fighting multiple enemies is not the same as killing a drowner with a steel sword. It requires more refined swordsmanship and footwork. Haven't you heard the saying? If monsters were easy, they'd come in packs." Sensing Vesemir's sincerity, Alan felt a headache coming on. "Limited time mission, all of you, come at me. Kill drowners 0 out of 3, mission reward, unknown." The missions from the Hunter's memoirs always popped up unexpectedly. The main quest, the beginning of the Witcher's path, did, and so did this limited time mission. Just as Vesemir said, clear them out directly, the mission appeared before Alan. In a few minutes, the drowners would be dealt with, making it hard to come up with an excuse in time. "Don't worry, Master Vesemir, I'm confident," Alan could only say. Vesemir looked skeptically at Alan's dried blood-stained face. "Confident? Wasn't it you who just collapsed from exhaustion, landing awkwardly on the drowner's corpse?" "Alan, if you fail, I can guarantee safety with 1 drowner, but not with 3, Vesemir continued to persuade. "Vesemir, let him try," the chief walked over from the wall. "But don't worry, the Witcher's Eye isn't that simple," the chief patted Vesemir's shoulder. "And I'm here too." Vesemir fell silent. He didn't know what the Witcher's Eye could do and didn't want to reveal this uncertainty before the chief. So, after a moment's thought, Vesemir finally agreed. With a signal for Alan to be careful, he and Litho moved the cages. Alan breathed a sigh of relief. He had just switched to the silver sword when he noticed the chief approaching. The chief glanced at the sword in Alan's hand and said, "If you win with a silver sword, I'll reward you with custom leather armor." After a pause, the chief took out an amulet from his waist. "But if you win with a steel sword, this Vira's illusion pendant will be yours." The magical accessory lay quietly in the Witcher's palm, emitting an alluring magical glow. Even without knowing its function, Alan could tell its value from Vesemir and Litho's envious expressions. However, seeing the chief's gentle smile, Alan felt more suspicious than delighted. Vesemir's opposition to this was understandable. Alan's defiance was sudden. Vesemir didn't believe Alan could win. Going along with it made sense. But why was this chief of the School of the Wolf doing this? Though there wasn't much reliable information in his memory, being called the chief, this seemingly young Witcher must be at the peak of the School of the Wolf. In the game, the Witchers of the School of the Wolf were upright. Was Kaer Morhen full of Geralt-like good guys now? Alan wasn't that naive. The number of children dead at the ancient sea fortress could bury Kaer Morhen. Why was such a high-ranking figure favoring an apprentice so much? Was it because of the Witcher's Eye? Suspicious. Very suspicious. Wait. Even the Witcher's Eye was suggested by this chief. Not only was it not recorded in the game, but other Witchers also didn't know about that experiment. For a moment, Alan felt as if he were in an ice cave, cold sweat instantly forming on his forehead. "What's wrong?" the chief asked, concerned. Nothing," Alan forced himself to reply calmly. "So, what's your choice? Chief, are you sure I'll win?" Alan probed. I believe the Witcher's Eye won't lose. The chief raised an eyebrow. Besides, even if you lose, what do I have to lose? Hearing his tone, did the Witcher's Eye truly exist? Alan pondered. Could this Witcher genuinely be acting in the school's interest, nurturing the younger generation? It seemed plausible. Without concrete evidence, Alan could only keep his suspicions to himself for now. Can I carry both swords and try? Alan asked. The chief nodded. Before entering the training ground, Alan handed the heavy and long Elsa to Hughes. This silver sword was too long and heavy for him to use now. Once everything was ready, Alan walked to the center of the training ground. Gripping the steel sword, he took a deep breath and nodded to Vesemir. Receiving the signal, Vesemir and Litho simultaneously opened the cages, dodged the drowners' attacks, and pushed their right hands forward. Ard sign. Their movements were as synchronized as skilled workers on an assembly line in Alan's past life. To be fair, drowners were indeed one of the simplest types of monsters. Although they had brains, they were useless. From a distance, they'd pounce, close up, they claw, and even closer, they'd bite. Simple attack patterns. After fighting a few times, one could control the distance and play the drowners around. Of course, this was only in the case of a single drowner. No matter what kind of monster, having more would be challenging. Distance, terrain, stamina, frequency, and attack methods would all change with the increase in monster numbers. Especially in a place like the apprentice training ground, a narrow area of less than 100 square meters with 4 beings fighting. It was very difficult to maneuver. The Witchers outside the training ground also consciously stayed away from the fence. This left Alan without the unexpected opportunity to shift the drowner's attention. Sidestepping the leading drowner's pounce, Alan tried using Hunter. But as soon as his mental power touched the magical field around the drowners, the second drowner's claws were already close. Holding the sword horizontally in front of his chest, blocking the muddy claws, Alan quickly adjusted his balance, stepping back with his right foot to counteract the force on the sword, then smoothly retracting the sword. A drowner always using full force naturally got flung by its own power. When his focus returned to the first drowner, the progress bar for Hunter had already disappeared. Hunter, indeed, has significant limitations, Alan thought. While thinking, Alan's body didn't stop. Quickly spinning his body, he slashed the steel sword prepared at his waist, hitting the last drowner's neck. Although the steel sword only chipped a bit, the drowner was still knocked to the ground. Instantly, all 3 drowners fell. Seeing this clean and neat scene, Litho outside the training ground changed his expression from casual to serious, finally becoming puzzled. His gaze fixed on Alan. After all the drowners fell, he asked Vesemir with surprise and uncertainty, Vesemir, is this apprentice's swordsmanship improving? Chapter 7, Vesemir also had the same doubts. Alan's first battle was not long ago. Swordsmanship was skillful, and the posture was accurate. An excellent Witcher apprentice, but that's it. But this time was different. The slight adjustments in balance, the unloading force under heavy blows. The coordination of the upper body and the stability of the footsteps were simply different from before, evident even to someone who had practiced a bit of swordsmanship, let alone a master like Vesemir. If you were to ask for an evaluation from him, then at least in terms of swordsmanship, Alan was already a qualified Witcher. Does the Witcher's Eye really have such miraculous abilities? Vesemir murmured to himself. What did you say? Litho asked. Nothing. Having dealt with Litho, Vesemir glanced at the chief who was silently observing the training ground, then refocused his attention on Alan. Hiss. Po. Hiss. Po. Alan breathed heavily, quickly stepping back a few paces, his eyes fixed on the drowner slowly crawling up from the ground. Indeed, it was still not enough. Without the Hunter ability, using a steel sword against monsters, he couldn't even break through their defenses. Fortunately, he had upgraded to the Wolf School's two-handed sword. Otherwise, he didn't know how many times he would have been hit by the drowners by now. After calming his breath slightly, Alan sheathed his steel sword and drew the silver sword. At this moment, apart from the drowner that was knocked over by the final sword strike, the other 2 had already charged up. With fierce faces swiftly approaching, Alan gripped the silver sword tightly. In the instant the drowner came within a step of him, Alan pushed off the ground with force, spinning his body in that instant of power transferring from the ground to his waist. In the blink of an eye, the silver blade traced a beautiful arc in the air, directly severing the drowner's neck. In the next moment, it split the outstretched claw of the following drowner in half. Before waiting for the head and claw to land, Alan didn't retreat but instead surged forward, executing another spin to behead the drowner that had lost its claw. At this point, although the third drowner was only 2 steps away, the outcome of the battle was already without suspense. Half a minute later, Alan breathed a sigh of relief, casually flicking the blood off his silver sword. Monster Group Drowner Level 2 defeated, Reward Calculation, Overcoming the Enemy, Basic Rating D, Overcoming Odds +1, D+, Beheading Intimidation +3, C+, Emergency Task +2, B, Final Evaluation, B, Received Spoils, Drowner's Heart Essence 3, Small Experience Pearls 9, Drowner's Chest 4, Time Limited Task Completed, all of you, attack together. Defeat Drowners 3 out of 3, Received Rewards, Small Experience Pearls 10, Universal Chest 1, the harvest was quite fruitful. Alan thought to himself. Listening to the prompt tones ringing in his ears, a sense of fullness and happiness surged. He felt grateful to the Drowners. Alan pondered in his heart, then lowered his head and walked towards the training grounds exit. Apprentice Alan. Alan looked up, instinctively catching what was thrown to him. Opening his palm, under the noon sun, the crystal-clear round pendant reflected colorful facets of light. It was Vera's illusion pendant. Chief, Alan looked at the chief in confusion. I used a silver sword to kill the Drowners. The chief smiled, looking at Alan approvingly, and said, I know. Compared to greedy recklessness, rational bravery is more worthy of reward. So, there's no mistake, Vera's illusion pendant is yours. Not only that, because of your outstanding performance, all apprentices can receive customized leather armor before the mountain trial. Without waiting for Alan's reply, the chief praised Vesemur's teaching skills a few more times before walking straight towards the gray-white main hall. Watching the chief's elegant departure, Alan's heart was filled with mixed feelings. Could it be that I'm really just overly suspicious? It seems quite normal for the chief of the school to reward promising apprentices. But in the background of the game, weren't witchers already on a downward slope by the year 1179? How come the Wolf School in 1179 is so dominant, using magical items to boost the morale of apprentices? Alan withdrew his gaze. 11-year-old Hughes, with silver hair and blue eyes, happily circled around him like a fluffy puppy. The two apprentices lying on the ground also looked at him with grateful eyes. For them, in the upcoming mountain trial, wearing tailored high-quality leather armor could mean the difference between life and death, or wearing tattered apprentice armor. Perhaps it was a matter of life and death. Vesemur and Litho stood nearby, smiling as they watched the apprentices celebrate their victory. They seemed to accept the Witcher's eye's omnipotent setting, at least on the surface, without questioning Alan's sudden improvement in strength. The onlookers among the Witchers had mostly left, but those who remained had smiles on their faces, seeming pleased with the future of the Wolf School. The warm autumn sun cast dazzling light through the towering great towers, shining into the 13-year-old Witcher apprentice Alan's blue cat-like eyes. In that instant, Alan felt like a hero. All right, celebration's over. Vesemur clapped his hands, attracting the attention of the apprentices. Alan, Hughes, stay. Vesemur nodded to Alan, then lowered his voice. The other injured apprentices, go to the alchemy room on the second floor of the South Tower for treatment, and grab lunch while you're there. The injured apprentices left upon hearing this. Alan and Hughes followed Vesemur to the 6 Drowner corpses. Litho had already gathered them together. Next, I'll teach you how to extract materials from Drowners. Vesemur drew a dagger from his waist. Watch carefully, I'll only demonstrate once. Don't we need to wait for Bond and the others? Hughes asked in confusion. This is your prey, it's none of the others' concern. Vesemur didn't look up. Don't be nosy, pay attention, I'll only show it once. The tongues and brains of Drowners are excellent alchemical materials. As the most common water elemental substrate in alchemy, their gentle nature can reconcile conflicts between many advanced materials. Although these two materials come from Drowners, the way they are processed is quite different. Vesemur's voice was still soothing. In less than 10 minutes, Hughes's weight was mostly pressing on Alan's back. The exhaustion from intense combat also gently knocked on Alan's brain at this moment, wanting to come in for a visit. Most people, including some wizards, believe that witchers rely on silver swords and signs to hunt monsters, but that's not entirely accurate. Potions are also important weapons. Witcher potions are made from strong alcohol, Drowner brains, dandelions, mushrooms, and so on. The recipe is simple, and the materials are readily available. After consumption, it significantly improves a witcher's reaction speed and suppresses pain. Witcher potions? Alan caught the keyword. Master Vesemur, are there only witcher potions that witchers can make? Of course not. Hearing the negative answer, Alan breathed a sigh of relief. Of course. There are so many potions in the game, how could they suddenly disappear? If you have money, Vesemur shrugged, you can certainly buy some flashy but impractical magical potions from the wizards, like night vision, enhanced strength, invisibility, and so on. The information in Vesemur's words was already quite clear, but Alan still held a glimmer of hope and asked, are witchers only able to make witcher potions? Of course, simple and practical, we only need this one. Alan's heart sank to the bottom of the valley. This isn't the Witcher world he's familiar with. Chapter 8, no diverse array of potions, no highly targeted blade oils. Only the jack-of-all-trades Witcher elixirs. Drink a sip when starting a fight, boost attack and reduce damage. Drink another when injured, stop bleeding and ease pain. After confirming once again with Visum, Alan could only helplessly accept reality. Time quietly slipped away as he processed materials on one side and pondered the future on the other. Even with divided attention, Alan handled the materials remarkably well. Nearly perfect dissection technique, Visum praised, hands crossed over his chest as he inspected Alan's work, the Drowner brain intact, and no damage to the magical nodes in the Drowner tongue. If this were at Banard Academy, you'd get top marks for material handling. This was almost an exaggerated compliment. Banard Academy was one of only 2 magic schools in the north, renowned for ambitious sorcerers and a variety of exotic alchemical products across the continent. In alchemy, Banard Academy was undoubtedly the most professional. Material handling, as an important branch of alchemy, naturally couldn't surpass the expertise of professional wizard apprentices like Alan. Alan nodded humbly in thanks. Visum, have you been to Banard? Alan curiously asked. Alan was curious about this question as well. Both Kaer Morhen and Banard were in the Gwyn Kingdom, and their castles were carved from the same blue mountain rocks. The only difference was that one trained witchers, and the other trained male witches. I've been a few times. Why? Why would a witcher go anywhere but to deal with monsters? Visum rolled his eyes, somewhat impatient. Of course, it's to solve monster problems. But doesn't Banard have its own magic school? Why hire witchers? Hughes was puzzled by the follow-up question. Apprentices weren't entirely ignorant of the world outside Kaer Morhen. There were always rumors circulating among the older children, brought from the outside world, about witchers created by wizards. Apprentices at Banard don't have to go through cruel trials, and King of Gwyn favors male witches. Banard Academy's prospective male witches, due to their lack of trials and promising future, always became objects of envy and jealousy among witcher apprentices. Sensing something unusual in Hugh's tone, the Witcher Master paused his inspection of the materials, turned to face the 2 apprentices, and said solemnly, because witchers are the best monster hunters. We live by this, but we're also doomed by it. The weight of his words carried a heavy implication, even a carefree child like Hughes could sense it. For a moment, the 3 fell into silence. Visum returned back to resume material inspection. Visum lowered his head, silver hair covering his eyes, his thoughts hidden. Doomed by it? Alan muttered to himself, staring absent-mindedly at the cold, ancient castle. It wasn't until Visum's reprimanding voice broke the silence that he snapped out of it. Hughes. Did you even listen to my lecture earlier? Visum's voice shattered the calm. The most important part of the Drowner tongue is the magical node at the base. Look at the materials you handled. TSK, with this quality of material, only ignorant farmers would fall for it. Litho also appeared at this time. Curiously, Hughes asked, what would farmers want with Drowner tongues? Ha ha, Litho laughed heartily, dodging Visum's swatting hand and jokingly said, Drowner tongue in alcohol. There are always people willing to try strange recipes for men's vigor, right? Men's vigor? Hughes had a puzzled look. Visum kicked at Litho, who skillfully dodged and ran off laughing. With Litho's interruption, Visum noticed that it was almost noon. After shifting the topic with a headache, Visum earnestly pointed out Hughes' questions one by one, then handed the demonstration materials, given as a reward for exceptional apprentices, to Alan. Then he let them go back to the apprentice dormitory for lunch. By the way, stay away from Banard, they don't welcome witchers. Just after bidding farewell to the apprentices, Visum suddenly remembered something and turned back to warn the 2 of them seriously. Without explaining further, he walked towards the direction Litho had left. After parting ways with Visum, Alan and Hughes returned to the apprentice dormitory located at the southwest corner of the castle. The apprentice dormitory was quite large. Surrounded by cold gray stone walls, over 40 wooden beds were tightly packed together, leaving only a narrow aisle for passage. In the empty room, only 4 beds had neatly stacked beddings on them. It felt desolate and gloomy. Looking at this scene, who could imagine that just 10 days ago, this place was filled with orphans and abandoned children from various northern countries. Among this group of apprentices, Alan's pass rate for the grass trial was less than 10%, far below the 40% average. For the Wolf School, this year might be considered a slow year. After returning to the dormitory, neither Alan nor Hughes had much enthusiasm. They each put away their belongings, cleaned themselves up a bit, and changed into clean clothes. Bond and Fred, who had already rested after eating lunch early, were already asleep. Their portion, belonging to Alan and Hughes, was placed on the table near the door. A beer glass filled with viscous gray mushroom juice. This was Alan's lunch. In the 10 days after passing the grass trial, their meals consisted of various strange liquids. These liquids could help the mutated bodies recover to a normal state quickly. After drinking their lunch, Alan and Hughes each returned to their beds, waiting for the medicine to take effect. There were ants crawling in his muscles. Pain and itching intertwined. Although it was far from the pain of the grass potion dissolving his internal organs, it was still difficult to endure. Alan instinctively moved his body, silently reciting the Witcher's Handbook in his mind. The effect of lunch lasted quite long, and he needed something to distract himself. Name: Alan. Age: 13. Title: Son of Miracles. Level: 2. Health: 100%. Stamina: 56 out of 56. Attributes: Strength 5.3, plus 0.1, Agility 5.4, plus 0.1, Constitution 5.6, plus 0.2, Perception 7.2, plus 0.3, Mystery 3.3, plus 0.2, Special Skills, Witcher Level 1, Appraisal Level 1, Skills, Wolf School Two-Handed Sword Level 2, 0 out of 500, Evaluation, Noob, Attributes increased. Alan was surprised, and his Constitution attribute increased by another 0.1. The mushroom juice was so effective. Although he had felt a slight increase in the past 2 days, there was no panel to confirm it. The immediate increase in values brought a sense of pleasure, easing much of the discomfort. Although the rate of attribute increase was slowing down, he could still gain a little more before the rest ended. No wonder those Witcher's stats are so high, Alan thought. Ignoring the glaring evaluation. After collecting all the rewards for the task, Alan opened his inventory. Items: Drowner Heart Essence 3, Small Experience Pearl 19, Drowner's Chest 8, General Chest 1. The quantity of small experience pearls wasn't enough to upgrade the two-handed sword, so he decided to keep them for now. The attributes are still increasing. Should I wait to use the essence after the medicine wears off? Alan hesitated in his mind. After a moment of contemplation, Alan decided to try one bottle of the Drowner's Heart Essence first. After all, Drowner's Heart Essence wasn't a precious reward, it dropped from every drowner he killed. It was just scarce now because Alan couldn't move freely and leave Kaer Morhen. With his mind focused on the item, a bottle filled with blue liquid disappeared from his inventory. A cold sensation reappeared in his throat. The next moment, Alan's expression changed drastically. What the hell? Drowners are such priceless treasures. Chapter 9. As the cold essence liquid slid down his esophagus, Alan was pleasantly surprised to find that the strange sensation in his muscles had significantly lessened. Compared to the last time he used it, a warmer stream of energy quickly spread from his stomach to his entire body. In a daze, Alan felt like he was soaking in a slightly hot spring, so comfortable that he almost made a sound. When the warm stream disappeared from his body, the pain and itchiness in his muscles also vanished. The heart essence liquid could also promote the absorption of lunch. Alan, who had been troubled by the strange mushroom soup, almost exclaimed in surprise. For the past 10 days, the apprentice's daily schedule was to attend classes in the morning and absorb potions in the afternoon and evening. If he had enough essence liquid, Alan could free up at least 2/3 of his time. He opened his character panel. Attributes: Strength 5.5, plus 0.2, Agility 5.6, plus 0.2, Constitution 6.2, plus 0.6, Perception 7.9, plus 0.7, Mystery 3.5, plus 0.2. His total attributes had increased by 1.9 points. This was almost double the value Alan had estimated. Suddenly, I kind of like the drowners, Alan thought to himself. Taking a deep breath, he slowly calmed his excited emotions. After the sudden increase in attributes, Alan's Witcher senses became extraordinarily sensitive. As he gradually calmed down, Alan caught many details inside the dormitory. The sweat induced by pain, the continuous painful gasps, the low growls suppressed deep in the throat. The creaking of wooden bedboards shattered against the cold, hard walls. Apart from him, everyone in the dormitory was suffering. Thinking about the other apprentices, who were all under 13 years old, the joy of his gain quickly diminished. A thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Should he share the essence liquid with them? Alan sighed and silently apologized in his heart. When in distress, focus on oneself. When successful, help the world. He wasn't yet qualified to help the world. At least not now. It was already late autumn. The Witchers who had gone out on their travels were returning one after another, trying to get back to Kaer Morhen before the heavy snow blocked the mountain paths for winter. From the moment the first Witcher returned to Kaer Morhen, the two-person high fireplace in the castle hall would be lit with bonfires. The lively banquet would go on from morning till night without stopping and would continue until the vernal equinox, when the ice and snow melted. After bidding farewell to the apprentices, Vesemir came to the castle hall. As soon as he entered, the heat mixed with the din of voices hit him. More than 20 witchers were sitting around the dining table, boasting about their experiences over the past year. Finding a random seat, Vesemir took the beer mug handed to him by a companion and took a hearty gulp. He let out a long, contented sigh. Turning to the companion who had handed him the drink, Vesemir casually started a conversation. Dante, I heard our king has declared war on the elves again. Dante had just returned to Kaer Morhen today. Witchers on their way back would always make a point to gather some information. Declared war? At most, it's just a raid. Witcher Dante shook his head, took a bite of bread, and continued, and your news is outdated. That less than 100-person skirmish ended 2 months ago. I stayed at Kaer Morhen this year to train apprentices, and it was Litho who told me about the declaration of war. Vesemir shrugged and asked, what do you know? Tell me in detail. Why? Dante asked curiously. Got an old flame among the elf folks. Vesemir's face darkened. Just tell me what you know. Stop with the nonsense. Disappointed at not finding any juicy gossip, Dante smacked his lips regretfully. War. Isn't there a war every year? Nobles blow the horns, and peasants charge with sticks. After the chaos, only the king and ghouls have full bellies. No, the ghouls might fill their stomachs, but the Glutton King might not, Litho said, walking over with a jug of wine. The Glutton King was the nickname of King Henselt of Dwyn among the common folk. Perhaps. Dante filled his mug and said thoughtfully, Henselt's actions are strange. He claims to have declared war on the elves, but his excuse is that an elf stole his jewels. An excuse? Vesemir asked curiously. You don't think it's true? Dante nodded and explained, no matter who stole the jewels, a direct manhunt would suffice. To declare war on an entire race because of it, don't you find that ridiculous? Besides, on my way back to Kaer Morhen, I encountered the king's personal guards. They seemed to be looking for someone. Litho probed, are you sure it was Henselt's personal guards? Don't they never leave the royal court? A black unicorn on a yellow background, I wouldn't mistake that, Dante continued. And I saw 3 sorcerers in the group. Hearing this, Vesemir and Litho exchanged glances. Litho said, that is indeed strange. But if they were looking for someone, they didn't ask for your help. Tracking down monsters is the most important part of a witcher's hunt, based on sparse and incomplete clues. Footprints, bloodstains, scents, as long as there are clues, they can't escape a witcher's keen senses. Over time, every witcher becomes a natural detective. Not only didn't they ask, but they seemed to deliberately avoid me. Dante scratched his head in frustration. I can't shake the feeling that something's wrong, but I can't figure out what. Feeling guilty for causing Dante to be downcast with his casual question, Vesemir consoled him, if you can't figure it out, don't dwell on it. After all, this is a conflict between the elves and the king of Dwyn. It has nothing to do with our wolf school. We remain neutral. Dante nodded upon hearing this and took a sip of his drink. However, his furrowed brows easily gave away that he hadn't let go of the issue. Sensing the atmosphere becoming tense, Litho raised his cup and said, let's not talk politics while we're eating. Let's switch to a more interesting topic. Vesemir nodded in agreement and then noticed Litho's mischievous smile. His heart sank instantly, sensing that things might not be simple. What interesting thing? Dante asked curiously. Vesemir lost his Elsa to an apprentice. Despite Vesemir's master's skill, he couldn't stop Litho's mouth. Dante hesitated and asked, Eldotsa? That silver sword worth more than 10,000 orens? 17,325 orens. Yes, the very sword you're thinking of. What? Vesemir, is that true? Dante exclaimed in surprise. His loud voice was particularly noticeable even in the noisy hall. At the dining table, other witchers' attention was drawn. At this moment, Vesemir's face was as dark as the charcoal in the fireplace. As if anticipating something, Vesemir didn't reply but instead raised his cup high to cover his eyes. Ha, it's absolutely true. Let me tell you. After laughing, Litho began recounting the morning's events in detail. Several witchers nearby who had witnessed it firsthand also laughed and filled in the gaps. As the story unfolded with its twists and turns, even the more distant witchers pricked up their ears and gradually stopped talking. Before long, only Litho's voice remained in the hall. And that's about it. After finishing his embellished story, Litho took a sip of beer to moisten his throat. The silence at the table lasted only a few seconds before boiling over like hot water. Among the witchers, some admired the apprentice's strength, some confirmed the price of the silver sword, some good-naturedly teased Vesemir. And, of course, some were curious about the witcher's eye. Unfortunately, none of the witchers at the table were fond of visiting the library, so no one could answer. Although I don't know what the Witcher's Eye is, it seems like you didn't lose unjustly. Dante patted Vesemur's shoulder in consolation. Vesemur sighed, seeming to come to terms with something, and downed his beer in one gulp. After wiping the foam from his beard, Vesemur thought for a moment and then nodded in acknowledgement. Skilled in swordsmanship, intelligent, and able to remain calm and rational in the face of setbacks. Alan is a good kid. I indeed lost fairly. Chapter 10. Alan didn't know that in just the time it took for a meal, he had already become famous in Kaer Morhen. Calming down from the joy brought by the essence potion, he turned his attention to the treasure chest. After silently praying for the protection of the souls of the deceased apprentices, Alan opened the chest. Ding. Drowner treasure chest 4 opened as the system prompt sounded. 4 white lights flashed. Rotten flesh 1. Rotten flesh 1. Small experience pearl 1. Although he had long expected that a treasure chest with a name as unimpressive as Drowner treasure chest wouldn't contain anything good, the 2 pieces of rotten flesh still broke through Alan's lowest expectations. Looking further down. On the culinary methods of drowners 1 Alan. A drowner chest contains a recipe for cooking drowners? Is this some kind of hellish joke? Alan grumbled to himself. And can drowner meat even taste good? No, why would anyone eat drowners in the first place? Setting aside the discomfort of their humanoid shape, drowners, as typical corpse-eating creatures, often haunt the sewers of human cities. How heavy would someone's taste have to be to not only eat them but also research 23 different cooking methods? This is insane. Purely out of curiosity, Alan opened the item description. Name, on the culinary methods of drowners. Type, miscellaneous. Function, none. Description, the second book in the Delicious Little Creatures series. Notes, written by the legendary chef Troll Lung, a bestseller for over 300 years. Alright, since it's written by a troll, that explains it. Even though it has many ridiculous points, since it's not a human recipe, it's trash. Alan continued to open the remaining chests. Given that 3 items had already turned out to be trash, Alan didn't hold any expectations. Ding. Drowner treasure chest 4 opened after 3 white lights, a brilliant golden light shone. Did something good come out? Alan quickly focused. In the dazzling golden light, a whale swam over from beyond his vision, transforming into a blueprint amidst the whale's cry. Obtained, rotten flesh, small experience pearl 2, recipe for killer whale potion, killer whale. With a thought, Alan opened the recipe. Name, killer whale. Type, potion recipe. Requirements, alchemy level 2, not met. Ingredients, dwarven spirit 1, berber cane fruit 5, bear fat 6, drowner tongue 5, effect. Increases breath-holding capacity underwater and enhances underwater vision. Notes, did the drowner escape into the water again? Quickly down a bottle of killer whale. The recipe and effects were just as he remembered from the game. Indeed, it's the potion from the game. With this, I'm set for the mountain trial in a month. Alan clenched his fist in excitement. The mountain trial. The final phase of the Witcher trials. Participants need to swim across a lake near Kaer Morhen, then pass through a cave inhabited by a one-eyed giant named Old Spartip without waking him, and finally cross a troll's territory to reach the Circle of Elements. There, the Wolf School medallion will be activated, which will warn the Witcher of the presence of monsters and magic throughout their career. Although Vesemur would definitely remind them of the key points to pass the mountain trial beforehand, for the sake of his own life, Alan had specifically asked for many details over the past 2 days. From the description of the mountain trial, although powerful monsters like the one-eyed giant and the troll seem to be the main causes of the high mortality rate, in reality, over 90% of the deaths were due to the very beginning of the trial. The seemingly calm lake was teeming with countless drowners. Drowners, which are relatively weak and have simple attack patterns on land, are extremely difficult to deal with in water. They move quickly and in packs. To pass this part, participants can only rely on their Witcher senses to avoid being detected by the drowners as much as possible. Although the trial is conducted during the day, and the eyes of Witcher apprentices have been modified with potions. However, the dark and complex underwater environment still makes it difficult for them to detect potential dangers. Moreover, swimming across the lake takes at least 3 hours. With physical exhaustion and mental tension, it is impossible to maintain focus for long periods. If an apprentice lets their guard down and attracts the monster's attention, the entire group might be wiped out. After all, the trial's 50% mortality rate doesn't mean only half will die each time, and the rest will surely pass. The trial of the grasses has a death rate even 10% lower than the mountain trial. But out of over 40 apprentices in Alan's batch, only 4 remained in the end. So, even with a cheat-like advantage, before obtaining the killer whale potion recipe, Alan still felt uncertain. However, now things were different. As long as he drinks the killer whale potion before the mountain trial, with increased breath-holding capacity and enhanced underwater vision, Alan's detection range underwater might even surpass that of the drowners. As long as he doesn't have the bad luck of locking eyes with Old Spartep the moment he enters the cave, Alan believed he had a 100% chance of passing the mountain trial. Strong confidence surged in his heart. Riding the wave of good luck, Alan hurriedly opened the common chest. A white light flashed. Ding. Obtained. Small experience pearl 10, well, that's better than rotten flesh, at least. Alan consoled himself with disappointment, then opened his character panel to see if there were any changes. Name, Alan. Age, 13, Title, Child of Miracles, Witcher Level, 2, Health, 100% Stamina, 62 out of 62, Attributes, Strength 5.5, plus 0.2, Agility 5.6, plus 0.2, Constitution 6.2, plus 0.6, Perception 7.9, plus 0.7, Mysticism 3.5, plus 0.2, Special Skills, Monster Hunting Level 1, Appraisal Level 1, Skills, Wolf School Two-Handed Sword Level 2, 0 out of 500, Recipe, Killer Whale, Unavailable, Items, Drowner Heart Essence 2, Rotten Flesh 3, Small Experience Pearl 31, on the Culinary Methods of Drowners, Evaluation, Weak, the evaluation had one less exclamation mark. From a third-rate weakling to a second-rate one? Alan sighed and closed the panel, then glanced out the window. The golden rays of the late autumn sun slanted onto the tower opposite. There was still a long time until the evening dinner. The time saved by the essence potion couldn't be wasted. But leaving just like that might seem too special, too noticeable? Alan was a bit conflicted internally. Low profile? Or high profile? That was the question. After carefully weighing the pros and cons, Alan made up his mind. Time waits for no one. Every extra bit of time before the mountain trial increases my chances of survival. Besides, my performance this morning was already special enough. Decision made. Alan stood up, changed clothes, and after strapping on Elsa, headed out of the dormitory. Alan? Where are you going? Hughes, looking pale, heard the commotion. Alan paused and replied, I have something to do. Oh, okay. Hughes wasn't fully awake yet. It wasn't until Alan's sword-bearing figure disappeared through the door that he realized. Huh? Did Alan skip lunch? How could he move so freely? Hughes wanted to catch up to Alan and ask. But the next wave of pain hit suddenly, and the distraction made it even worse than before. Creak creak with the violent shaking of the bed, Hughes curled up tightly, gritting his teeth, unable to spare any energy to think about anything else. Chapter 11, the potion formula for the killer whale was now in his hand. Alan's next goal was naturally alchemy level 2, and the key was how to acquire the skill. Hunting down drowners and opening chests was one way, but he had little faith in his luck, and besides, there was no guarantee that the chests would contain the alchemy skill. Another way was through learning. Since the Wolf School's double-handed sword could be recognized and upgraded by the Witcher's manual, there was no reason alchemy couldn't be. Thus, after leaving the apprentice dormitory, Alan headed straight to the eastern tower. Vesemir had mentioned in the morning that there was an alchemy room on the second floor of the southern tower, where someone should know alchemy. Kaer Morhen in 1179 was different from the one in the game set in 1272. Due to the extremely low survival rate of Witcher apprentices, the large castle was naturally not bustling with people. However, it wasn't entirely desolate either. Perhaps because winter was approaching and traveling Witchers were returning home. Just on the path he walked, Alan had already passed 4 or 5 Witchers carrying double swords. On either side of the main road leading to the main castle, there were scattered shops like blacksmiths, tailors, and material stores. If it weren't for the fact that the shopkeepers were all elderly Witchers with white hair and cat-like eyes, Alan might have mistaken this for an ordinary castle. So, what made this grand castle become dilapidated, causing the once prosperous Wolf School to nearly perish, leaving only Vesemir, Geralt, Eskel, and Lambert to defend Kaer Morhen in the final battle? What year was that? Alan couldn't help but wonder. After gaining some insight into the trial of the grasses, Alan couldn't help but think about the future he had been intentionally avoiding. Being forewarned wasn't always a good thing. Knowing the future inevitably made him worry about tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. It was even more distressing to only know the outcome, without knowing the process, or even the time when the crisis would start. The journey to the alchemy room was smooth. He didn't encounter anyone stopping him to ask why he wasn't in the apprentice dormitory, trembling in pain during lunch break. The pre-prepared excuses were completely unused. Arriving at the tower, walking through the long corridors and stairs, Alan reached the alchemy room. The wooden door of the alchemy room was closed. Knock, 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 knock. Alan knocked on the door. Creak. The door was opened by a girl a bit older than him. She had dark red hair and a delicate appearance. "Who are you looking for?" the girl asked. A girl? Wasn't the Wolf School's sorcerer supposed to be a male mage? Although a bit surprised, Alan still followed his plan and asked, "Is this the Wolf School's alchemy room? I want to learn alchemy." "Learn alchemy?" The girl seemed very surprised. After scrutinizing him for a moment, she replied, "This is indeed the alchemy room, but it's private." Private? This was something Alan hadn't anticipated. Visamur had mentioned an alchemy room for apprentices to treat injuries and obtain lunch, but it turned out it wasn't owned by the school. Did the mages in Kaer Morhen have such power? Or maybe even in Kaer Morhen, the relationship between mages and witchers was beginning to show cracks? After a few seconds of hesitation, Alan took out the illusion pendant from his collar and tentatively asked, "Can I learn from the owner here? I can pay a tuition fee." Just as the girl was about to speak, a mature female voice came from inside the room. "Mary? Who's at the door?" Mary turned back and replied, "A young witcher, wants to pay to learn alchemy." "A young witcher? Pay to learn alchemy?" The mature voice sounded surprised. "An anomaly among the brainless brutes who only know how to swing swords?" Click, click, click. The sound of what seemed like high heels approached. Feeling awkward, Alan stood at the door. Mary, equally awkward, forced a smile filled with apology. When the footsteps stopped, a woman appeared before Alan. In the deep autumn of Kaer Morhen, even the roadside weeds would frost over in the morning to show respect for the austere autumn. From this woman, however, Alan saw no respect for autumn at all. She wore thin, translucent deep V-neck dress. The fiery red silk fabric was embroidered with intricate patterns in gold thread and pearls. Coupled with her flowing dark red hair, at first glance, Alan thought it was the height of summer. Her sexy attire, combined with a face as delicate as a porcelain doll's. Clearly, this was not a male mage, but a sorceress. Alan vaguely sensed that he might have come to the wrong place. But since he was already here, "Can I learn alchemy from you?" he asked again, bracing himself, then took off the magic pendant and placed it in his palm. "I can pay the tuition with this magic pendant." The sorceress was stunned upon seeing Alan. Then she looked at the pendant in Alan's palm with a complex expression and asked, "Do you know the name of this necklace?" "Vera's illusion pendant?" The sorceress nodded and said, "Yes, that's its name, and also, I am Vera." "Alan?" PFFT. A suppressed laugh came from beside him. "Sorry." The girl, Mary, apologized awkwardly and ran inside. Alan, extremely embarrassed, withdrew the pendant and prepared to leave. At this moment, the sorceress suddenly said, "But you can." Alan instinctively asked, "Can what?" "You asked if I could teach you alchemy, right?" Sorceress Vera repeated. "I said yes." Then, the sorceress turned and walked inside. Alan quickly followed. Bang! As soon as he walked in, the wooden door closed by itself. "Is this magic?" Alan marveled inwardly. Entering the alchemy room, Alan found that although it was a place for alchemy, there was no strange smell inside. Instead, as soon as he entered, he was greeted by a faint scent of oranges mixed with cardamom. Plush red carpets, colorful oil paintings. Lace curtains adorned the cold stone window sills. Except for the absence of a bed, this looked more like a bedroom than an alchemy room. Only the 4 alchemy tables against the wall stubbornly proved the room's true purpose. Mary was sitting at one of the alchemy tables, grinding something with a mortar and pestle. Seeing Alan enter, she smiled and nodded, then continued grinding. "Sit here," Vera pointed to a seat beside her. Alan sat down awkwardly, still holding the pendant, unsure where to put it. "Where should I put this pendant?" he asked. "That's your item, why ask me?" Vera looked puzzled but quickly added, "I won't charge you tuition for teaching you alchemy." "Then what do you want?" Alan asked. He was happy to keep the pendant, but free things were often the most expensive. Alan didn't believe his charm was so great that a strange sorceress would teach him for free. "Just answer one question." Vera raised a slender, white finger. "Why do you want to learn alchemy? What kind of price is that?" Alan thought. Unsure if the sorceress could read minds, Alan decided to tell the truth after some consideration. "I want to brew a potion to pass the trial of the mountains." "You're still an apprentice?" Mary exclaimed. The girl had been openly eavesdropping. Alan nodded. Mary's surprise was understandable. Monster studies, swordsmanship, signs, adapting to body modification potions. The period between the trial of the grasses and the trial of the mountains was probably the busiest time in a witcher's life. If not for the essence elixir, he would still be lying in the apprentice dormitory, with no time to wander around. However, what puzzled him was that the sorceress remained expressionless. She wasn't surprised, nor did she ask further questions, as if she either accepted his answer or didn't care at all. Snap. Vera snapped her fingers. A black leather book slowly floated from the alchemy table next to Mary. After gently landing on Alan's desk, it opened to the first page on its own. Without acknowledging Alan's surprise, Vera began the lesson directly. Since you want to brew potions, let's start with the basics of alchemy and potions. Potions, as the name implies, are elixirs containing magical power. Ding! A clue for the skill, alchemy, has been found. Would you like to spend 10,000 small experience feeds to unlock the skill? 10,000? Alan, Chapter 12, there was a good news and a bad news. Good news, the skill could be unlocked. Bad news, no money. Alan almost couldn't keep his expression in check. He counted several times to make sure it was indeed 4 zeros. 10,000 small experience pearls. Based on the main quest's rewards, he would have to kill at least 1,000 drowners. System, you might as well just tell me I can't learn it and let me give up. Alan cursed in his heart. What's wrong? Do you not understand something? A gentle voice came from beside him. Vera seemed to have noticed Alan's unusual behavior. Nothing. Alan quickly cleared his mind and refocused his attention on the text. Then let's continue. Rare magical materials, complex potion rituals, advanced magic control skills. Chaotic magic running through the entire potion-making process. Due to the limitations of paper-making technology and the monopoly of knowledge by various classes, books in this world could hold very limited information. The textbook Visum were used for the morning lecture. Drowners and swamp witches, though it looked thick, actually only covered 2 monsters. The same was true for the book Vera was teaching from, Alchemy and Potions. The black leather cover and back took up half the book's thickness, with the precious knowledge occupying the other half. Among the already limited pages, many were filled with decorative floral patterns that took up space. It was the kind of book with little content, but you could tell at a glance that it was very expensive. This made Alan afraid to touch it. There was very little content in the book. Vera only spent less than 2 hours to finish the entire book, even with a lot of additional knowledge and experience she shared. Snap. A snap of the fingers. The black leather book closed and floated back slowly to its original place on the bookshelf. Vera looked into Alan's eyes and said, alchemy is a discipline that requires a lifetime of study. Even just the potion-making part takes at least half a year to get started. Alan was taken aback. Of course, he knew the value of alchemy. Just obtaining the skill was worth 1,000 drowners, he understood that deeply. Not knowing what a sorceress meant, Alan could only nod. Vera paused for a few seconds, seemingly organizing her thoughts. What I mean is, if you want to make potions for the mountain trial, starting to learn now is too late. If you don't mind, you can give me the formula, and I'll make a few potions for you. If it's a formula I've never seen before, not only will I waive the making fee, but I can also compensate you with orans or magical items depending on the value. Alan was silent. The cost to unlock the skill had been decreasing during Vera's lecture. It only stopped decreasing when the lecture ended. Alan glanced at the corner of his vision. Would you like to spend 9,950 small experience pearls to unlock the skill? But the sorceress was right, even if he could unlock it with small experience pearls, he didn't have enough time. A 2-hour lecture reduced 50 small experience pearls, so Alan would need to attend nearly 400 hours. If every lesson was like this, it would be almost impossible for him to learn before the mountain trial. But Vera's solution was also not feasible. It wasn't that Alan was unwilling to provide the formula, but he couldn't. The killer whale formula was quietly lying in his inventory, but without alchemy level 2 skill, Alan couldn't view the detailed making process. The sorceress was still waiting for a reply. After considering his words, Alan realized he couldn't think of a tactful way to say it in a short time. So he could only apologize. Sorry, I want to make it myself. Alright, then you can leave. Alan silently stood up, paused for a moment, sincerely thanked the sorceress, and walked towards the door. Vera's proposed exchange conditions were very fair. So it was only natural for her to not give him lessons after being rejected. Alan himself felt a bit offensive. It looks like I need to find another way to unlock the skill. At that moment, a clear and sweet female voice came from behind. Tomorrow afternoon, same time. Alan turned abruptly. He saw Mary glaring at him with dissatisfaction. The sorceress sat upright in her seat, looking at him, waiting for his response. After a moment of silence, Alan said seriously, "Thank you, I'll be there on time tomorrow." Seeing the sorceress nod, Alan opened the door and left the alchemy room, then headed towards the apprentice dormitory. Chief. At the corner of the floor where the alchemy room was located, Alan met the chief of the wolf school. The chief seemed surprised to see him, but didn't say anything, nodded in acknowledgement, and left. The direction happened to be where Alan had just left the alchemy room. Alchemy room. Teacher, why do you help such an ungrateful apprentice? Mary began to complain to the sorceress as soon as Alan left. It's none of your concern. Focus on grinding, don't get distracted, the sorceress replied without looking at Mary, her gaze still on the wooden door of the alchemy room. Mary felt a bit aggrieved and wanted to say something, but under the authority of the teacher, she didn't even dare to complain in her mind, lowering her head to grind medicinal charcoal in the mortar. In front of that Witcher apprentice, the teacher didn't know why she behaved so kindly, but Mary didn't dare to act recklessly because of it. Vera of Tisan had a renowned reputation across the continent, relying not only on her profound knowledge of alchemy. Knock, knock, knock. The door of the alchemy room was knocked. Mary was about to open the door when she heard a snap, and then the door opened. Outside the door was the chief of the wolf school. The chief walked in and was about to speak. Snap. Another snap. Immediately followed by the sound of a head hitting the table, thud, thud. The reason it was two thuds was because the head was very elastic. After the first impact, it bounced back a bit. What's wrong, Vera? The chief was surprised to see Mary knocked down by a snap from the sorceress, and then Vera walked over with her head down. Her slender and smooth arm wrapped around the chief's waist clad in cotton armor. The sorceress buried her face deeply in the chief's broad chest. The Witcher hesitated for a moment, awkwardly hugged the sorceress, and remained silent. The sensitive Witcher senses detected the scent of tears. The two embraced like this, not knowing how long had passed. You met him? This was a statement, not a question. After a moment of silence, the man said, yeah, I met him. Just at the corner outside the door. He has grown up, I almost didn't recognize him at first glance. The woman's voice trembled, reaching the man's heart through the cotton armor and shirt. Even the hardened heart of a Witcher seemed to have some inexplicable noise. After a moment of silence, the man comforted, after all, it's been almost 10 years since we last met, it's normal. I'm also surprised that you came at this time. Hearing the term 10 years, the Witcher felt the soft body in his arms tremble slightly. Then there was a long silence. Long enough that the sunlight coming in through the window turned red and then dimmed, replaced by a long sigh. Of course I had to come. After all, I want to see him free. Or, I want to collect his corpse myself. Chapter 13. Upon hearing the woman's long sigh, the man said nothing. Perhaps he didn't know what to say. In the end, the woman pushed the man away. A snap of her fingers, and she tidied herself up. The sorceress looked up, her face expressionless. What do you need from me? Decades of meticulous makeup, an unchanging tone. If he hadn't looked down and seen his chest still wet, the Witcher might have thought what just happened was an illusion. Snap, another snap of her fingers. A wave of magically warm air swept over, and the red cotton armor returned to its state before entering the room. Just like before. The Witcher nostalgically sighed. Then, he stopped overthinking, organized his words, and said, when I was returning to Kaer Morhen, I passed by Ardkari. Haxo summoned me and told me two things. The sorceress asked with interest, what did the glutton say? One thing about non-human races. Haxo asked me what I thought of the elves. What did you say? The Witcher was about to answer but was interrupted. Forget it, no need to say, it's nothing more than the wolf school adhering to neutrality. The sorceress had a usual look on her face. The Witcher said helplessly, that's exactly what I said. The path of glory must not be desecrated. The wolf school's target is only those dangerous monsters. The path of glory? The sorceress conjured a bottle of red wine and a goblet, filling it with the fine wine as she sighed. Besides in Tisan and knightly novels, I haven't heard that term anywhere else for a long time. And then, my knight. The Witcher, smelling the aroma of the wine in the air, asked helplessly, before that, aren't you going to pour me a glass too? No, the sorceress shook the red wine in her glass, refusing. I'm in a bad mood right now. I don't want to share anything with anyone. Swallowing his saliva quietly, the Witcher could only continue. Next spring equinox, he's arranged a competition. A competition? The sorceress was intrigued. Yes, a competition between the apprentices of the wolf school and the cat school. You agreed? The sorceress put down her glass, her expression changing slightly. I had to agree. The winning school will receive double the funding each year. The sorceress asked, and the losers get nothing? Yes, nothing, including what they originally had. I have a feeling these two things are connected, but... The Witcher paused, sighed, and sincerely requested, Vera, you know. No matter how powerful the monster, even a dragon, I have never been afraid. But politics. It's not my strength, nor is it for the other Witchers of the wolf school. So, Vera, use your wisdom to help me, just like when the Witcher order fell apart, guide me one more time. Vera raised her goblet, took a sip of the rich red wine, and replied coldly, don't call me Vera, we haven't had that relationship for a long time. Raising her hand to stop the Witcher's protest, the sorceress continued, But considering you still remember the promise from 10 years ago, I will help you gather information. Promise? Did you see the illusion pendant? Not only did I see it, Vera suddenly burst into laughter as if remembering something amusing. After 10 years, that pendant almost returned to its creator. Then, the sorceress seemed to recall something, and her eyes quickly dimmed. She stood up from her seat, slowly walked to the cold windowsill, lowered her eyes, and stared westward from the tower. Watching the woman who had just been laughing heartily become dejected in an instant, the Witcher thought to himself, sure enough, still the same as before, not changed a bit. Ignoring the noise in the Witcher's mind, the sorceress softly chanted in a daze, "Know this, the time of sword and axe is near, it is the era of the cold wolf and snow. The world will die in frost and be reborn under a new sun. Eschew this. This is inevitable. Watch for the signs. To know what the signs are." She paused, her voice becoming lighter and more ethereal. Her cool voice was almost indistinguishable, as if it came from the clouds above the blue mountains. First, Filius Miraculi, the child of miracles, will be born in the land of bitter cold. Death and rebirth, the non-human will bring blood and fire. The prophecy of Aethelin. The Witcher listened in silence as the sorceress chanted, his expression complex. Vera, the child of miracles has crossed the tomb of death and is about to be reborn. The sorceress still looked into the distance, leaving only her silent, graceful back to him. After hesitating for a moment, the Witcher slowly walked over, gently wrapped his arms around the sorceress's shoulders, and said, "Don't worry, Vera. Just as the prophecy said, our child will be reborn." Vera sighed, tightened her grip on the Witcher's arm, and closed her eyes. "Saul." The Witcher, Saul, responded gently, "I'm here. Do you think he will hate me?" Before Saul could answer, Vera sorrowfully murmured to herself, "He will hate me. He definitely will." Saul sighed deeply, looking up at the snow-covered peak of the Blue Mountains. He said nothing. At this moment, Alan naturally didn't know that the head of the wolf school and the sorceress Vera were his biological parents. The thought had never even crossed his mind. After all, in the game setting, Witchers and sorceresses were not supposed to have offspring. Sorceresses had at least some cases of bearing children. Witchers had no such examples. The probability of two infertile professions having offspring was nearly zero. After leaving the tower, Alan didn't rush back to his dormitory. He walked slowly along the main road toward the apprentice dormitory, his mind constantly pondering the 9,950 small experience points. The solution was simple. Either reduce the requirement through learning, or increase the stockpile through hunting. The problem was the time span. He had to learn alchemy before the trial of the grasses, which was within a month. Relying solely on the progress of the sorceress's lectures was nearly impossible. Depending on Vesemer's occasional combat classes also wouldn't suffice to gather the necessary experience points. I must change the status quo, Alan thought. Vera's alchemy classes couldn't be skipped, as they were his only source of alchemical knowledge. The experience points needed to unlock alchemy could significantly decrease with learning. As a student, he couldn't ask Vera to speed up. So, he could only change his current hunting situation. To hunt more monsters, he had to leave Kaer Morhen. As his thoughts became clearer, Alan became more convinced that only by going out to hunt could he solve his current predicament. Outside the majestic castle, there were countless drowners. And not just drowners. Wraiths, foglets, ghouls. These were all targets Alan could hunt. More importantly, with a greater variety and number of hunts, the chances of triggering quests would increase. Who knows, completing a few quests might directly reward him with alchemy level 2. But how can I leave Kaer Morhen? Alan murmured to himself. Chapter 14. When Alan returned to the apprentice dormitory, it was already dark. Torches were lit in the dormitory corridor. In the flickering light, he saw a familiar figure standing at the dormitory door, carrying something. As he walked closer, a wide-brimmed black hat, dark golden cat-like eyes, with one sword on his back. It was Vesemir. Master Vesemir, what are you doing here? Bringing you something, here. Alan reached out to take it, glancing down. A brown bag, packed full and quite heavy in his hand. Silver swords need daily maintenance. Vesemir crossed his arms, leaning against a wall. After lunch, I figured you probably didn't have the tools, so I brought Elsa's tools for you. Vesemir then asked, do you remember how to maintain a silver sword? Of course, Alan nodded. Good, Vesemir nodded in return, then remarked, I always knew you were different, so I came early. Didn't expect to miss you even then. Don't you want to ask why? Alan asked curiously. He had prepared several excuses, but it seemed he wouldn't need any of them. Vesemir smiled and said, apprentices with exceptional talent can digest potions early. You've even got Witcher eyes, it's not surprising you could manage that. Is that so? That's good, Alan felt relieved. The Wolf School forbade Witcher apprentices from leaving Kaer Morhen. But as apprentices passed trials, the areas of the castle accessible to them expanded. So in their free time, as long as apprentices stayed within the castle, it was fine. After delivering the items, Vesemir was about to leave. But seeing the relieved look on Alan's face, he couldn't help but ask, "By the way, where did you go just now?" Alan replied, "The alchemy room in the South Tower." "Alchemy room? Did he go to get dinner?" Vesemir looked at the apprentice with a puzzled expression. Alan was empty-handed, aside from the bag Vesemir had just given him. So he asked, "Where's your dinner? Weren't you going to the alchemy room to get potions?" "No, I went to learn alchemy." "Alchemy? Why would a Witcher apprentice learn alchemy?" "No, more importantly, where did he find the time to learn alchemy, and who was teaching him? Wasn't there only one male sorcerer apprentice in the alchemy room?" Alan's words brought a flood of questions to Vesemir's mind, leaving him unsure where to start. After a long silence, Vesemir sorted through the confusion in his head and asked, "When did you leave the dormitory?" Given the special nature of Witcher eyes, Vesemir had come around dusk. It was just getting dark now. He had originally thought Alan had woken up just a little before he arrived. But that time was only enough to go to and from the alchemy room and the apprentice dormitory, not enough to do anything else. "I left when the sun was right overhead," Alan answered honestly. "At that time, I was still bragging with Litho and the others," Vesemir thought. Though unlikely, Vesemir couldn't help but ask, "Did you drink the lunch potion?" "I did," Alan replied, puzzled at Vesemir's question. Every main meal in these 10 days was crucial for apprentices after the trial of the grasses. Not just for increasing attributes, or rather, increasing attributes was only the superficial effect. The true purpose of these main meals is to harmonize the conflict between the mutated tissues and the normal flesh within the apprentices. If any main meal is missed, at the very least, a tumor would grow somewhere on the body, and at worst, it could be life-threatening. The apprentices who have made it this far all have a strong will to survive. Who would joke around with their own life? Those who didn't care about their lives would have died during the trial of the grasses. Oh. As long as you've taken it, that's good, that's good. Vesemir nodded repeatedly, a bit dazed, and then casually asked, "How long did it take you to digest the side effects of the lunch?" When this question was asked, Alan understood why Vesemir was acting so strangely. Seeing the disbelief on the Witcher Master's face, Alan felt a bit smug inside. Then, Alan collected himself and, mimicking Hugh's innocent confusion, asked, "I don't know why, but the side effects of today's lunch disappeared in the blink of an eye. Master Vesemir, is it normal for gifted apprentices to digest it this quickly?" Vesemir was silent for a moment before awkwardly changing the subject. "Who taught you alchemy?" "There's usually only a male sorcerer apprentice in the alchemy room, and he can only mix simple potions. You shouldn't be deceived by him." Vesemir didn't ask why he was learning alchemy. During the materials handling earlier today, Alan had already shown curiosity about alchemy. "Miss Vera taught me." "Vera?" Vesemir pondered for a moment before suddenly exclaiming, "Vera from Tisan? The woman known as the Scarlet Red Fox? Are you asking me?" Alan thought to himself, "Wasn't it you who sent Bond and Fred to that alchemy room for treatment? And what's this about a male sorcerer apprentice? Aren't all the ones in the alchemy room women?" Though puzzled, Alan simply replied, "I'm not sure about that. I only know her name is Vera." At this moment, a deep voice came from outside. "What's with Vera?" Alan and Vesemir looked towards the sound. Heavy footsteps approached from the distance. The head of the Wolf School appeared from the darkness, carrying a delicate water pouch. "Chief. Chief." Nodding in response, the chief handed the water pouch to Alan, saying, "Here's your dinner. Take it inside quickly." After thanking him, and seeing Vesemir signaling him to leave, Alan turned and walked into the dormitory. The apprentices inside were all awake, lying on their sides in bed, seemingly digesting the lingering effects of their lunch. Seeing someone enter, they all turned their heads to look at Alan. Noticing the stares, Alan smiled and nodded, then raised the water pouch and said, "The chief brought dinner." Before he could finish his sentence, everyone in the apprentice dormitory instantly closed their eyes. Weakly and shakily, they turned away, presenting their backsides to Alan. They looked like children pretending to sleep to avoid taking medicine. Alan couldn't help but chuckle. All right. With the elixir, he had momentarily forgotten what these main meals meant to the apprentices. After putting away the bag and water pouch, Alan sat on the bed, listening intently to the conversation between the chief and Vesemir outside the door. But due to the distance, he could only catch fragments of the conversation. Words like Vera, alchemy class, Witcher eyes, and experiment records. After a few brief exchanges, the two Witchers left together. Chapter 15. After Vesemir and the chief left, Alan sat on the bed, thinking about how to leave Kaer Morhen. Maybe I'm not cut out to be a Witcher? Alan turned towards the voice and saw Hughes lying on the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. Hughes's talent was indeed very poor. At this moment, Fred and Bont had already finished dinner, and Hughes had just recovered from lunch. By the time he digested dinner, he would be slower than the others. Combined, Hughes slept no more than 4 hours each night. Although Vsummer was a good person, he wouldn't accommodate apprentices with poor talent. This was the rule for witchers training their apprentices. It seemed like the only trial left for the apprentices was the trial of the grasses. But the selection process was ongoing. Not to mention someone as naturally gifted as you, even compared to Bont, I'm far behind. Hughes turned his back. Alan couldn't see Hughes's expression, so he just patted his shoulder to comfort him. It will get better. Morning. On the road to Kaer Morhen. Do you guys feel it? Hughes rubbed his eyes and asked, puzzled, does today feel clearer than yesterday? Fred wiped his face, unsure. Now that you mention it, it does feel a bit clearer. No way? Bont touched his forehead. I don't feel any different. Maybe it's just your imagination? The three seemed to have differing opinions, but the atmosphere was harmonious. After Alan's impressive feat of taking on 3 at once yesterday, the relationship among the 4 apprentices had improved significantly. Or rather, they had become more familiar with each other. Alan and Hughes had been friends since childhood, starting witcher training together at 4 years old. Then came the selection, the trial of the grasses, and the trial of dreams. After several trials, saying they were comrades in life and death was not an exaggeration. Bond and Fred didn't know each other. But it only took a small event for children to bond. The chief's custom leather armor served as that event. Though the armor had yet to be delivered, the 4 had already formed a small group with Alan as the leader. Seeing Bond and Fred's differing feelings, Hughes curiously tilted his head and asked, Alan, what do you think? Do you feel clearer today than yesterday? Alan didn't get a chance to respond before Bond interrupted. Hughes, you call this clear? Bond patted Hughes's little head. You forgot Alan isn't affected by the potions, you just mentioned it. Oh, I forgot. Hughes said with an embarrassed smile. Chatter. Chatter. Even the bone-chilling wind couldn't silence their chattering. Alan felt like he was walking with a group of chatterboxes, not witcher apprentices. They had been talking non-stop since waking up, making Alan's head spin. But he had only himself to blame. If he hadn't acted impulsively last night, these little guys wouldn't be so energetic now. Yes, Alan had drugged their water last night. After taking the water bag from the chief and before entering the dormitory, Alan had mischievously poured a quarter bottle of heart extract into it. He had just resolved to mind his own business at noon, and by evening he had broken that resolution. Reflecting on it afterward, Alan couldn't understand why he had acted so impulsively. They wouldn't have died without the extract. At most, they'd suffer a bit longer, doze off more during lessons, and face a slightly higher risk of death during the trial of the grasses. Could it be the influence of the original Alan? Alan sighed deeply. In this lively atmosphere, Alan and the others arrived at the apprentice training ground. Vsummer was already there. Wearing a black wide-brimmed hat, he sat alone on the stone where he had lectured yesterday. Seeing the apprentices full of energy, Vsummer was very satisfied. Very good, you all look very energetic. Looks like no one will be sleeping through my class today, Vsummer said, turning his gaze to Hughes. What do you think, Hughes? The intense gaze made Hughes stammer. I don't think so. Vsummer's face was expressionless. Are you asking me? And no. Not maybe, definitely not. No one will sleep during your class. Hughes shivered and quickly corrected himself. Very well, let's begin today's lesson. Vsummer nodded and started the lesson on signs. Signs are simple spells that can be cast quickly with one hand during combat. We use this technique to support fast-paced battles, but always remember that it's just a supplementary measure. Your sword is your most reliable partner. There are 6 signs passed down in the School of the Wolf. Today, we'll be learning one of them, Ken. Ken is a defensive sign that forms a protective shield of magical energy around you, absorbing physical damage. As beginners, Ken is the most suitable sign for you. It can safely help you locate your magical organ and lay the foundation for learning other signs. As Vsummer began his lecture, Alan heard a familiar mechanical sound. Ding, a clue to the skill, Ken, has been discovered. Would you like to spend 100 small experience orbs to unlock the skill? Selling the signs individually? Monster hunting notebook, you really are something. Alan had thought the 6 signs would be learned as a whole. The option to unlock the skill made Alan even more focused. The specific gesture is to bend the thumb and little finger, bring the middle and ring fingers together, and push forward. Would you like to spend 64 small experience orbs to unlock the skill? Remember that the symbol for the Ken sign is a triangle, the most stable structure discovered by sorcerers. When constructing it in your mind, Would you like to spend 32 small experience orbs to unlock the skill? Now, I'll demonstrate. Watch my hand gestures and use your Witcher senses to feel the flow of magic. About half an hour later, Vesemir stopped his lecture. Now it was time to practice. After attempting for a while, Alan realized it would take him at least half a day to master this sign. But the Witcher apprentice schedule required him to excel in order to increase his chances of leaving Kaer Morhen. So, would you like to spend 8 small experience orbs to unlock the skill? Alan didn't hesitate any longer and clicked with his mind. Ding. You have learned the skill, Ken Level 1. As the notification sounded, a flood of unfamiliar memories of training and Ken filled Alan's mind. It felt as if he had trained in this sign for a year. After assimilating the information, Alan opened his status panel. Name, Alan. Age, 13. Title, Miracle Child. Witcher Level, 3. Health, 100% Stamina, 71 out of 71. Attributes, Strength 5.8, plus 0.3, Agility 5.9, plus 0.3, Constitution 7.1, plus 0.9, Perception 8.4, plus 0.5, Mystery 3.9, plus 0.4, Special Skills, Monster Hunting Level 1, Appraisal Level 1, Skills, School of the Wolf Two-Handed Sword Level 2, 0 out of 500, Ken Level 1, 0 out of 100, Formulas, Killer Whale, Unusable, Items, Drowner Heart Extract 1, Rotten Flesh 3, Small Experience Orbs 23, a brief discussion on 23 cooking methods for drowners, Evaluation, Weak, the attribute increase came from dinner and the 3/4 of the Drowner Heart Extract. In total, it added 2.9 points to his attributes, which, although 0.3 less than yesterday's noon, was still quite considerable. Upon waking up, Alan could clearly feel his improved stamina. Walking from the apprentice dormitory to the training ground, he didn't even feel out of breath. The increase in attributes was addictive, and Alan could now sense the surging power within his body. However, this pleasant feeling ended when he checked the item column. Seeing the lone Drowner Heart Extract was glaring. Even though he had planned for it, he couldn't help but feel a bit nervous. Only one Drowner Heart Extract left? Whether I can leave Kaer Morhen will depend on how effective the newly acquired Ken is. Chapter 16, Isn't the Ken sign very simple? Have you all mastered it? Vesemir asked as he casually dispelled the light membrane from his body with a wave of his right hand. As soon as Vesemir finished speaking, the apprentices' complaints started to rise one after another. Hughes complained, how can it be that fast? I haven't even found where my mutated organ is yet. Fred and Bond also echoed his sentiments. Although they were slightly better off than Hughes, they had only just located their mutated organs. How could anyone master a sign so quickly? Ha ha, then you all need to work harder. I've taught many apprentices who could learn a sign within a day. If any of you can learn Ken within a day, I will. Vesemir was about to make a promise when he suddenly remembered that one apprentice had yet to speak. So he quickly interrupted himself and nonchalantly asked, Alan, have you mastered it? Alan replied without hesitation, yes. He decided not to hide his abilities anymore. Last night, he had pondered for a long time about how to leave the castle and hunt drowners. He finally concluded that his only path was through Vesemir. Tomorrow would be another monstrum and practical combat class, so Vesemir would definitely leave Kaer Morhen today. Have you really mastered it? Vesemir adjusted his hat in disbelief. Alan didn't say anything. He followed the knowledge in his mind, bent his thumb and little finger, brought his middle and ring fingers together, and drew a triangle in front of him. A faint yellow light flashed briefly. The room fell silent. Hughes instinctively mimicked Alan's movements, bending his fingers and forming the sign. Nothing happened. Awkwardly withdrawing his right hand, Hughes glanced around and, seeing that no one was paying attention to him, sighed in relief. A mixture of relief, envy, and frustration filled his mind. Why is it so simple for him, but I can't do it? Hughes thought. Finally, he couldn't help but exclaim, Alan, you're amazing. Others snapped out of their stupor at Hughes's voice. Alan, how did you do it? Teach me quickly, Fred asked eagerly. Bond echoed, looking at Alan with anticipation. Alan was speechless. The teacher is right here, do you expect me to teach you? That would be disrespectful to Vesemir. But Vesemir didn't mind. After observing for a moment, he extended his index finger and tapped the nearly invisible Ken shield around Alan. With a pop, the translucent shield shattered almost instantly. Although the shield's strength is still weak, the magical distribution is even, and the casting speed is not slow, Vesemir assessed. This Ken sign is qualified. If Vesemir hadn't taken over these apprentices after their trial of the grasses, he would have doubted whether Alan had already learned it in advance. How could someone learn it right after the lesson without any practice? It was truly extraordinary. Looking at Alan's expressionless face, Waiting for his evaluation, Vesemir couldn't help but reflect, how many times has it been now? Being astounded by an apprentice's extraordinary talent. It's time to check that experimental record in the library. Are all apprentices with witcher eyes like Alan? How could such witchers disappear without a trace? Pushing the apprentices back into their places, Vesemir praised, Alan, your kin sign is qualified. Is this considered qualified? A shield that breaks with a single poke is useless, Bond couldn't help but question. Shallow thinking. Vesemir put away his smile, being able to cast a sign is just the first step, physical fitness is the ultimate key to a sign's strength. You have just undergone the trial of the grasses, and your mutated tissues have not yet fully integrated. After the potions are mixed, the strength of all signs will undergo a significant leap, especially the Ken sign, which can withstand 2 to 3 attacks from drowners, Vesemir explained. After explaining this, Vesemir kindly looked at Alan and said, Alan, today's lesson on signs is only about Ken. You are now free to go. Wow. The apprentices looked at Alan enviously, thinking he was about to leave. However, Alan shook his head and requested to Vesemir, Master Vesemir, I have one request. What is it? Vesemir asked. Alan organized his words, yesterday morning, I heard you and Litho were going outside to catch drowners. I want to go with you. Curiously, Vesemir asked, why? I want to hunt more drowners and familiarize myself with their attack patterns. Alan paused for a moment, then honestly admitted, the trial of the mountains is coming soon, and I'm afraid I won't even pass the first stage. Upon hearing about the trial of the mountains, Vesemir subconsciously looked at the other 3 apprentices who had been chatting quietly. Their moods visibly dampened upon hearing Alan's words. The trial of the mountains was the last big challenge hanging over their heads. Which apprentice hadn't had nightmares about dying during the trial? Finally, Vesemir sighed lightly in his heart and agreed to Alan's request. Litho and I were originally planning to go catch drowners this afternoon. However, since you want to come, we can change the time to evening. After you finish your classes this afternoon, come directly here, and we'll depart together. Okay, Master Vesemir, Alan responded immediately. Seeing everything unfold as he had imagined, Alan breathed a sigh of relief. He had intended to stay and assist Vesemir in teaching the apprentices, but he was quickly asked to leave. The reason given was that it would disrupt the other apprentices' classes. Alan accepted this reason and left obediently. However, that evening, Hughes told Alan that he, Bond, and Fred all agreed that Alan's teaching skills were much better than Vesemir's. After leaving the apprentice training ground, Alan hesitated between the library and the alchemy room before choosing the library. It wasn't yet time for the appointment with the sorceress. Besides, not only was Vesemir curious about what a witcher's eyes were like, Alan was also very curious. He needed this information to figure out how to disguise himself in the future. The library and the alchemy room were both in the inner area of Kaer Morhen, located in towers on either side of the main castle. One was in the northern tower, and the other in the eastern tower. When Alan arrived at the library, the door was open. He peered inside. Huge. That was Alan's first impression of the Wolf School's library. Although it couldn't compare to libraries from his previous life, looking in from the doorway, the dark wooden bookshelves stretched row after row, seemingly endless. Before coming here, Alan had thought the library would be about the same size as the alchemy room. Inside the library was only a young man in a black robe. He wore glasses and held a book, sitting at the doorway, deeply engrossed in reading. He didn't even notice Alan approaching. Hello, Alan greeted softly. The man remained immersed in the world of his book, not looking up. Alan could only knock on his table, raising his voice and calling out again. Hello, I'm here to find the experimental records. Bang. Startled by Alan's reminder, the man flung the book upwards. If Alan's perception hadn't been significantly enhanced earlier that morning, the book would have almost hit him in the face. Swiftly catching the book, Alan couldn't help but joke to himself, who knew the first time I'd benefit from enhanced perception wouldn't be in battle. As he set the book down, Alan glanced at its title, The Witcher Master and Night Succubus's 1001 Nights. Alan? Chapter 17, Wow. Which Master Witcher played so extravagantly? Because there was someone nearby, Alan resisted the curiosity to open this book. Lowering his head, he coincidentally met a pair of awkward eyes. After handing over the book, Alan smiled and imitated Vesemir's manner, tilting his head and asking, What's the name of this Master Witcher? And what kind of creature is the Night Succubus? Did the battle really last for over 1,000 days? As for the Night Succubus with its goat-horned hooves, Alan naturally knew. A kind of intelligent creature similar to the succubi in his previous life. They lived by absorbing male essence, and some believed they were simply obsessed with the pleasures between men and women. However, to avoid an awkward first meeting with a stranger, Alan chose to play innocent. Moreover, in the original memories of Alan, There was no such creature as the night succubus. And Vesemer's monsterology hadn't covered the night succubus lesson yet. The man carefully scrutinized Alan's expression upon hearing his questions. Then he sighed with relief and casually replied, "These things have nothing to do with you. What are you here for?" Alan didn't pay attention to his casual reply and quickly focused on finding the information he needed. "I am here to find the experimental records about the Witcher's Eye. I don't know about the Witcher's Eye, but all the experimental records of your wolf school are in the deepest part of the library." As he spoke, the man led Alan deeper into the reading room. "You're from the wolf school? Aren't you?" "Used to be, but I haven't been since my teacher and the chief had a falling out 10 years ago." The man explained casually, then cursed. He was a real old bastard, left on his own and didn't even take his apprentices with him. This man looked cold and indifferent, but surprisingly easy to get along with, and quite talkative. Unconsciously, Alan gained a lot of information. Such as the fact that the Witchers and the Wizards of the Wolf School had really fallen out. Before they finished walking, Alan hurriedly continued to inquire, "So what are you doing now? Managing the library?" "No, just got kicked out of the alchemy lab by Lady Vera, so I'm staying here for a bit." The man shrugged. "After the vernal equinox, I'll be teaching at Banard." According to Vesemer, that apprentice who only knew how to brew simple potions is Zeus. "But how can you, an apprentice wizard, go teach at Banard Academy?" "Teaching at Banard? What are you teaching?" "Don't know." "Alan? A teacher who doesn't know what he's teaching? I have a recommendation letter from Lady Vera." The man seemed to sense Alan's disbelief and explained proudly, "She said there would be arrangements when I got there." "So you just believed her? What nonsense are you talking about?" "That's Lady Vera, the Scarlet Fox." The man glanced at Alan Askew and didn't explain further. In silence, they walked a little further and stopped in front of a bookshelf. It was a very old-looking bookshelf. Dark rings were carved into the wood like decorative patterns on the shelf, with 3 rows of books neatly arranged, all covered in a thick layer of dust. "Here we are, all the Wolf School's experimental data is here. Take your time and search for it yourself." Alan glanced at the bookshelf, searching for experimental records, when suddenly he noticed a large gap in the middle of the second row. Had some experimental records been taken? Wait a moment. Alan quickly pulled back the man who had already taken a few steps, pointing to the gap on the shelf and asking, "Where are the experimental records?" The man looked somewhat impatiently at the center of the bookshelf, pondered for a moment, and said, "Last night Lady Vera's apprentice came by. I saw her take a few books and leave. Those should be the experimental records you're looking for." Alan was stunned at his words. Mary taking the experimental records meant that the sorceress must want to see them. Seeing that Alan had no other questions, the man hurried impatiently towards the door. After standing still for a moment, Alan thought, without touching the data on the shelf, and turned to leave. There was no need to flip through these experimental records. The experimental data on the Witcher's Eye must have all been taken by the sorceress. But why would the sorceress be studying the Witcher's Eye? Out of curiosity? What exactly is the Witcher's Eye? Arriving at the door of the library, Alan suddenly realized, clearly, he came to the library to solve a problem, but after this visit, he only had more questions? The temporary librarian, whose name he didn't know, moved the wooden chair back and once again became obsessed with strange books. Before leaving, Alan glanced at that book with a strange impulse. With just one glance, he saw the 2 special uses of the wide-brimmed black hat. Alan was instantly shocked and left the library with several more questions. After leaving the library, Alan walked straight to the tower on the south side of the main castle. Although it was still early, he had nowhere else to go, so he decided to check out the alchemy lab. Maybe he could start class early. Arriving at the door of the alchemy lab, Alan was about to knock. Squeak! The door opened by itself. After Alan walked in, he glanced around the alchemy lab. Carpet, murals, lace curtains, and the alchemy table. Compared to yesterday, there was neither more nor less. The experimental records of the Witcher's Eye were not in this room. "What are you looking for?" Following the voice, Alan looked over and almost didn't recognize the sorceress from yesterday. Plain gray linen dress, high-necked snow-white sweater, and brown boots. The attire was quite conservative. If it weren't for that dark red long hair, Alan would have thought he had entered the wrong room. The experimental records of the Witcher's Eye. There was no need to hide the fact that he was looking for experimental records, so Alan said directly, "The male witch in the library told me that Mary took them." Speaking of which, where was Mary? "Mary is in the inner room organizing the experimental records." "Damn, this sorceress really can read minds." "I didn't read your mind, your thoughts were all written on your face," Vera said with a playful smile, continuing, "It's rare to see someone like you so curious about studying the Witcher's Eye among witchers." "I'm just curious about the Witcher's Eye." Ordinary witchers wouldn't flip through experimental records out of curiosity. There aren't any interesting stories in there. After a few breaths, Vera suddenly asked, Alan, has anyone ever told you that you should be a wizard rather than a witcher? No one has said that. Alan shrugged at the words and asked back, besides, I didn't have a choice, did I? Who wants to be a warrior when they can be a mage? But why did he become a witcher as soon as he crossed over? The sorceress looked at Alan's beautiful blue cat eyes in silence for a long time before sighing and saying, yeah. In the face of fate, none of us have a choice. Chapter 18. After reflecting on the fickleness of fate, the sorceress began today's lesson, Instruments and Furnaces. Alchemy is a precise art. Even with the help of magic, we still need various instruments for distillation, sublimation, filtration, fixation. From the witch's cauldron in the mouths of the common folk to glass-made bottles and jars, stills and kilns, wizards have always sought more precise tools to aid in the refining of potions. Ding. Spend 9,890 small experience pearls to unlock the skill? It must be said that steadily reducing the unlocking requirements for alchemy every day is quite beneficial. At the end of the lesson, 10 more small experience pearls were reduced compared to yesterday. Although the quantity is not large, it is progress after all. Just treat it as daily tasks. Alan thought to himself. Snap a snap. Instruments and furnaces flew back to its original position. The sorceress Veer looked into Alan's eyes and advised, since you want to refine potions yourself, I have removed everything from alchemy that isn't directly related to potion making. This does not mean that these books are unimportant. On the contrary, if after the trial on the high mountains you want to go further in alchemy, these courses are indispensable. The omitted materials, I will write them down for you in a few days. Veer's explanation was meticulous, as if afraid that Alan would miss any important knowledge. But why? His life had nothing to do with the sorceress. If he missed these lessons, he missed them. Why was she so concerned about his future? Alan has always been a suspicious person, especially sensitive to the unfounded kindness of others. Past experiences taught him that no one in this world acts without expecting something in return. This character trait has certainly caused him to miss out on a lot, but at the same time, it has also saved him from much trouble. Therefore, faced with the sorceress's kindness, although Alan was grateful, that sense of vigilance deep inside him never disappeared. Mary, bring the mushroom soup over here, Vera called out to the inner room. Squeak, the door to the inner room opened. Mary came out from the inner room carrying a water bag. Compared to yesterday, today's girl had no significant difference. Except for a swollen bump on her forehead. But since Alan wasn't familiar with her, he just took the water bag, politely thanked both of them, and took his leave. Leaving the tower, it was just about noon. Alan estimated that Vesemir should still be at the apprentice training ground, so he headed straight in that direction. Hey! The lucky apprentice is here. Litho was also at the training ground, arms crossed leaning against the wall, seemingly waiting for Vesemir to finish class. Vesemir was currently facing away from Alan, carefully inspecting the apprentice's magic seal practice. Upon hearing Litho's voice, he turned and asked, Alan, you're back? The alchemy class ended, so I came straight here. Hasn't class ended yet? Upon hearing this, Vesemir looked up and realized it was already quite late. He said to the apprentices in the training ground, today ends here. Zeus, you need more practice, as your progress is the slowest. The other apprentices are the same. The day after tomorrow, I will teach Aldo the magic seals. Don't expect me to slow down the pace for someone. Vesemir seemed to feel that his words were a bit heavy, and added, of course. If there's time, you can also consult Alan. His Ken magic seal is very standard. Of course. If he's willing. Alan felt that all the apprentices were looking at him, and he agreed, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer. Vesemir nodded satisfactorily, glanced at the water bag in the apprentice's hand, and said, Alan, have your lunch here. Since your alchemy class ended today, we'll be heading out soon. Alan nodded and was about to open the water bag containing his lunch when he suddenly heard Litho's voice. Wait a minute. Litho looked at Alan with confusion and asked Vesemir, what did those words mean just now? I understand each word individually, but together they don't make sense. Vesemir seemed to have anticipated this and waved his hand, saying, it's none of your concern. Just follow along with us later. Litho. Since he would be accompanying Litho later, Alan explained, Master Vesemir promised to take me hunting drowners this afternoon. Litho scratched his head, still puzzled. How do you have time in the afternoon? Aren't apprentices supposed to digest lunch in the afternoon? What do you think the Witcher's eye is? Alan digests potions quickly, Vesemir reprimanded. You still need to find time to read more, Litho. Raising his hand to silence Litho's torrent of questions, Vesemir added, forget about him, Alan, Hurry up and finish your drink. We're leaving soon. Okay. Estimating the volume, Alan pulled out the stopper, glug, 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 and quickly finished his portion. He wiped his mouth with his hand and sealed the wooden stopper. Alan was about to hand the water bag back to Vesemir when he looked up and saw all 5 people in the training ground staring straight at him without blinking. Gulp. Alan swallowed nervously and asked weakly, "What are you all looking at?" "Nothing." All 5 said in unison, still not averting their gaze. Alan. At this moment, that tingling sensation, both painful and itchy, gradually spread throughout his body. Alan quickly recited notes on drowners and used up the last essence of a drowner's heart. The cold liquid flowed down, and a warm sensation surged up. Even without any effect, this feeling was addictive. Especially after the warmth disappeared, the swelling sensation of strength throughout his body made Alan involuntarily twitch slightly. Not only did he shake off the fatigue of the morning, but he even felt an urge to punch Vesemir. He summoned the character panel with his mind. Name, Alan. Age, 13. Title, Son of Miracles. Witcher level, 3. Health, 100%. Stamina 80 out of 80. Attributes, Strength 6.1, plus 0.3, Agility 6.2, plus 0.3, Constitution 8, plus 0.9, Perception 8.9, plus 0.5, Mystery 4.3, plus 0.4, Special Skills, Witcher level 1, Appraisal level 1, Skills, Wolf School Two-Handed Sword level 2, 0 out of 500, Ken level 1, 0 out of 100, Recipes, Killer Whale, Unavailable, Items, Rotten Meat 3, Small Experience Pearls 23, 23 Cooking Methods for Drowners, Review, Mediocre. The increase in data occupied Alan's mind with an inflated attitude. But reason prompted him to appraise Vesemir. Name, Vesemir. Attributes, Strength 46, Agility 57, Constitution 65, Perception 70, Mystery 41, alright. As he calmed down, the vast gap made the volcano in Alan's heart erupt instantly. Putting away the panel, Alan looked up. The apprentice training ground was unusually quiet at this moment, and the several people standing opposite Alan were as still as statues, unmoving. Just as Alan was thinking about what to say, Vesemir spoke. He asked somewhat uncertainly, Alan, are you done? Chapter 19, Alan, are you done? Vesemir was somewhat unsure. Litho was so shocked that he couldn't say anything, but hearing Vesemir's tone, he squinted and thought to himself, you don't know either, so why were you so cocky just now? Alan adjusted his mindset and replied, yes, I'm fine now. Unable to hold back, Litho patted Vesemir on the shoulder and asked, damn. What's with the mushroom soup? Did you get distracted by some steamy book? How dare the apprentice's mushroom soup be cut corners? You better watch your mouth. Lady Vera is the one who cooks the mushroom soup, Vesemir, mindful of companionship, couldn't help but remind Litho. Vera? Which Vera? The Vera from Towsend, the Crimson Fox. Damn. Is it the chief's old flame? Litho was surprised to the point of being unable to recover. The chief finally understands the difficulty of a school without formal witches? Before he could finish, Litho's interest was piqued again. How did he manage to sway the sorceress over? Do you know any details? I don't know. Also, a reminder. Vesemir glanced at Alan, pretending not to have heard anything, and reminded again, Alan is now learning alchemy from Lady Vera. They meet every day. Litho's face immediately darkened. He trusted apprentices not to talk nonsense, but most sorceresses could read minds. If Lady Vera read what he had just said. After a rapid mental calculation, Litho's face grew even darker. Why didn't you remind me earlier, Vesemir? Litho angrily blamed. Are you sure I didn't remind you? Vesemir's face was full of righteousness. Smack a slap on the forehead. What is Lady Vera's famous magic? Litho persisted. Vera's shape-shifting spell, also known as the Leech Transformation Curse, is said to have extremely high medicinal value when transformed from a witcher. Can I ask the chief for mercy? If the chief knew what you just said, he might not help you. With trembling amber cat eyes, Litho paced back and forth in front of everyone, and after a moment, he suddenly stopped. What's wrong? Have you come up with a solution? Vesemir asked curiously. Actually, you don't have to worry. Even if it's for the chief's sake, Lady Vera won't necessarily kill you. There are more cruel methods than death, and Lady Vera is particularly adept at those. Litho rolled his eyes and said, I plan to hide outside for a while. Are you not planning to spend winter in Kaer Morhen this year? What do you think? Let's go quickly. Aren't you supposed to take the apprentices to catch drowners? Litho urged Vesemir impatiently. Helpless, Vesemir bid a hasty farewell to the apprentices and called Alan to walk towards the castle gate. Is Lady Vera really not that ruthless? Walking down the mountain road, Alan couldn't help but ask. What are you joking about, Crimson? Litho. Upon hearing Alan's question, Litho couldn't help but explain to the ignorant apprentice what Crimson Fox meant. He was quickly stopped by Vesemir. Litho smiled apologetically and remained silent, walking ahead of the three. Vesemir withdrew his gaze, carefully considered his words, and explained to Alan, Litho is a reckless person. He didn't mean to offend a lady. More than speaking to Alan, Vesemir seemed to be apologizing to a sorceress who might see this scene. After finishing a long version of Vesemir's Litho's reflection, Vesemir seemed somewhat remorseful and advised, Alan, you should show some respect to Lady Vera. She comes from an era much older than when I was born, even before my grandfather's grandfather. Alan's expression turned strange upon hearing this. He wondered if Lady Vera would punish Litho or Vesemir if she knew about today's conversations. For a Witcher master, age was a sensitive topic for women. Lady Vera's methods may sometimes seem extreme, but it was a chaotic time. Regardless of good or evil, everyone used similar means against their enemies. As far as I know, Lady Vera has never bullied the weak, so you don't need to be afraid. Because Lady Vera never bullied the weak, Alan couldn't help but roll his eyes. Vesemir sure knew how to talk. It's really hard for a Witcher master to say he's weakened so tactfully. SHH. We're here. Litho, at the front of the group, suddenly stopped and turned to remind them. The first lesson in monster hunting, tracking, Vesemir said solemnly, pointing quietly down. Use your sharp Witcher senses to find this group of drowners. Ding. Main quest discovered, tracking, find drowner group 0 out of 1, quest reward, tracking level 1, finally, the ghost system had some activity. Truly, paradise lay outside Kaer Morhen Castle. Taking a deep breath to calm his nerves, Alan looked down. The late autumn ground was littered with dry, yellowed leaves scattered without any pattern. Alan didn't notice anything at first glance. If Litho pointed out the traces, Alan might suspect he was being teased, but not Vesemir. He took his apprentice's training seriously. So Alan focused and tried to observe from different angles. Since both Vesemir and the system confirmed it was a group of drowners. Starting from the characteristics of the drowner should be correct. After observing the direction of the sun, Alan walked to the opposite side. Sure enough, there was a small area that shimmered. It was the reflection of a liquid, definitely left by drowners. Well done, I didn't expect you to find a clue on your first hunt, Vesemir nodded in satisfaction. Continue, find them, and deal with them. Upon hearing this, Alan nodded earnestly. Click, click. The autumn leaves were dry and brittle, making a fine crackling sound underfoot. Alan walked at the forefront of the trio, Vesemir observing from behind, and Litho distractedly bringing up the rear. As the air gradually became damp, a stream quickly appeared before Alan's eyes. Gurgle, gurgle. Quietly crouching down, Alan followed the sound. There were about 8 drowners playing on the grassy edge of the stream. Judging the strength of the drowners is quite simple. Vesemir whispered. By their physique, Alan continued. Exactly. So none of these are weak. They're much stronger than the ones you killed yesterday, Vesemir said. It's really not easy to find so many weak drowners, Litho added, looking deeply resentful. Vesemir ignored Litho. He looked at Alan and casually asked, how many do you want? His tone was as casual as asking how many loaves of bread to eat for dinner. Alan didn't reply immediately. He appraised the closest and strongest drowner. Name, drowner, level 6, attributes, strength 13, agility 11, constitution 23, perception 8, mystery 1, level 6. It's a difficulty I can handle. Alan's eyes gleamed slightly as he turned to Vesemir and said, I'll take them all. Chapter 20, good lad, I like your boldness. We'll be watching over you. Litho lowered his voice, smiling as he patted Alan on the shoulder. Vesemir also nodded. Don't forget the kin sign, Alan. Alan nodded, drawing the elven silver sword and stealthily approaching the nearest drowner. Elven silver sword, Elsa, still didn't quite fit his hand. However, with enhanced attributes, the wolf school dual-handed sword had also reached level 2, and Alan could now use her effectively in combat. Click, click. Even though his steps were light, the crushed leaves stubbornly made their sound. The blue figure drew closer. His heartbeat quickened. Alan estimated the distance in his mind. It was impossible to take down all 8 drowners at once, at least not for Alan at the moment. He had to strike as many monsters as possible before they could react. Magic flowed within him. His thumb and forefinger formed a triangle in front of him. Ken sign. A faint yellow light flashed. Due to the enhancement of the mystery attribute, Alan's Ken sign this time was visibly darker than it was in the morning. With the shield in place, Alan hesitated no longer. He crouched down, and in the instant his pupils contracted like a cat's, he charged forward like a tiger descending from a mountain. 5 meters were crossed in 2 steps. In the blink of an eye, Alan pivoted, and Elsa, like a silver lightning bolt, slashed across a drowner's neck. Splurt the blade cut smoothly, without any hesitation, and slid out from the other side. Without time to marvel at the sharpness of the silver sword, Alan sidestepped swiftly past the falling corpse. His left and right feet moved quickly, crossing in a swift step. With a bow stance, he swung his sword close to his waist. Following the right foot hitting the ground, strength flowed from the earth through his right leg and spine, reaching both hands. Stab. The silver sword, like a silver needle, pierced accurately, striking 2 closely adjacent drowners. The silver light pierced through the neck and then into the right eye of the second drowner, finally emerging from the back of its skull. If it weren't for reaching level 2 in dual-handed sword skills, advancing in strength, agility, and perception, Alan wouldn't have been able to be so precise. Of course, none of these were the most crucial. The most crucial was Elsa, the silver sword, worthy of her price of 17,325 orens. Not only did she smoothly sever heads, even when thrust into hard skulls, it felt as if she were stabbing into soft tofu. It was only then that the drowner group began to react, howling and rushing towards Alan. Alan quickly retreated 2 steps. As he caught his breath, he disrupted the formation of the oncoming drowners. His 2 steps not only allowed the first drowner to attack him but also hindered the approach of the others. Beautiful footwork, exquisite tactics. Hueco couldn't help but exclaim, "Vesemir, did you see that? He doesn't seem like just an apprentice." Vesemir smiled proudly. "Who do you think taught him?" Yeah, and most importantly, isn't it because of the 17,325 orens Elsa you contributed? She's amazing." Hueco couldn't stand seeing someone showing off in front of him. Vesemir's face darkened, and he kicked Hueco hard, saying, "Have you thought about where to hide? Avoiding the pursuit of Vera isn't easy." Hueco was about to dodge, but because of that name, his body trembled involuntarily, taking the kick head-on. Despicable. Tit for tat. Thinking of a refuge, Hueco rarely showed a trace of worry on his face. He resigned himself, saying, "Just find any city. Respected and great sorceress Vera is so busy, she probably wouldn't bother looking for me over something small." That's not necessarily true. The women I've met are not necessarily straightforward. Maybe they enjoy teaching lessons to poor souls like you. Shut up and watch your precious apprentice. Don't let him have any accidents. Hueco patted the mud stains kicked onto his trousers, saying in a sinister tone, "I don't want to change my mind and return to Kaer Morhen." Vesemir glared at him again at the mention of that. Then he refocused his gaze back to the babbling brook. Dodging the claws by leaning back, Alan rolled over as if performing acrobatics. After landing lightly, he suddenly stood up, lifting his sword with both hands. A silver arc flashed, and in an instant, the drowner's head was split in 2, the cut perfectly crossing through the forehead. 3 left, Alan silently counted. Even the brainless drowners no longer had the ferocity they started with at this moment. It was the instinct of monsters to seek advantage and avoid harm. Now, like a pack of wolves, the 3 drowners circled Alan hesitantly. Alan took this opportunity to defend with his sword in the midsection, calming his breath. Huff. Huff. The short but intense battle made Alan involuntarily gasp loudly. One drowner thought it saw a weakness and charged recklessly. Then it was cleanly split in 2. 2 left. The death of this drowner burst the morale of the remaining monsters. Gwala. Gwala. They screamed in confusion, turning to plunge into the unknown depths of the stream. But the apprentice Witcher had long anticipated this scene. He quickly rushed between the 2 remaining drowners. Turning swiftly. A silver arc painted a perfect circle. From afar, it looked like a full moon rising in the blue sky. Both beautiful and brutal. Splurt. 2 sounds of flesh being cut sounded almost simultaneously. Then, 2 bodies fell, kicking up dust. Ding. Monster group drowners level 5 exterminated. Reward calculation, overcoming enemies, basic rating D, higher level kills +3, C, outnumbered victory +2, B, decapitation intimidation +3, A, main quest +3, S, final evaluation, S rank, double rewards, received loot, drowner's heart essence 16, small experience pearls 28, drowner's treasure chest 10, main quest tracking completed, find drowner group, 1 out of 1, reward received, tracking level 1, damn. S. Double rewards. Indeed, hunting monsters is the only righteous path in the Witcher's notes. 16 drowner's heart essence, enough for 8 days' worth of meals. As Alan was about to continue reading, 2 Witchers approached. Ha ha ha. Well done, Alan, Hueco left as he approached, patting Alan's shoulder vigorously. It hurt so much that Alan couldn't tell if it was congratulations or if he was deliberately transferring the resentment from the sorceress to his apprentice. Vesemir also walked over with a smile, arms crossed, praising, "Alan, once you master all the signs, you'll be a qualified witcher." Hearing Vesemir's approval, Alan was very happy inside, but he remained modest, saying, "Oh, I still have a lot to improve." Seemingly remembering something, Alan raised the silver sword in his hand and said with a smile, "Thanks to your Elsa. She's really amazing." Chapter 21. Upon hearing this, Vesemir's smile froze on his face. He squinted, examining Alan's innocent face stained with murky blood. The clean and clear blue eyes on the apprentice's small face made people can't help but feel close to him. It must have been influenced by Leto. How could a 13-year-old apprentice understand these things? Vesemir thought to himself. He glanced at the newly shiny silver sword and sighed. Even after killing 8 drowners, Elsa's sword was still spotless. Then, Vesemir handed Alan a dagger and said, "Handle all the materials. Remember what I taught you yesterday?" Alan nodded, took the dagger, and squatted down to handle the materials. The materials needed to be handled from the drowners were only their tongues and brains. After Alan processed 2, the remaining few were behind a large rock. This rock happened to block Vesemir and Leto's line of sight. After squatting down, Alan hesitated for a moment and used a dagger to cut open the drowner's chest. Does drowner's heart essence come from the drowner's heart? Alan had wondered about this yesterday, but Vesemir had been watching him the whole time. The sharp dagger cut from under the drowner's jaw along the midline to its groin. At the moment when he broke open the bloody ribs, a strong stench hit Alan's face. Alan's pupils also dilated at this moment. In the black-red chest cavity, surrounded by thick blood vessels, the center was empty without a trace, and the cut around the heart was very neat, as if the space around the heart had been moved away in one piece. The drowner's heart essence indeed comes from the hearts of the killed drowners, Alan thought to himself. Although he was mentally prepared, seeing this scene with his own eyes still brought him an indescribable shock. When was the heart taken? Was it when he killed them, or when the mission was settled? And how did the Witcher's Journal take these hearts away? Was it magic? No. Alan shook his head. In the past 2 days, Vesemir and Leto were both there when he killed the drowners, and at the apprentice training ground yesterday, they were surrounded by a circle of Witchers. They all had the wolf school badge that could alert them to magic and monsters. If the Witcher's Journal's method was magic, it couldn't have escaped their notice. Or was it a more advanced method than magic? Divine power? Alan sighed. There was too little information, and he could only jot down this intelligence for now. There weren't many materials to handle, and Alan soon removed all the drowners' tongues and brains. However, the number wasn't 8 pairs. The tongues and brains of 3 drowners had been split into 2 by Elsa. Such materials were useless. Vesemir roughly inspected Alan's spoils and nodded satisfactorily. Not bad, not bad. Handling drowner materials may be simple, but patience is crucial. It's very rare for you to handle the materials so well while maintaining speed. Vesemir didn't mention the several damaged materials. During battle, killing enemies came first. Going into battle with the mindset of demanding intact materials was irresponsible to life. Although materials could be exchanged for money. But no matter how much money, without life, what's the point? After the inspection, Vesemir handed Alan a specially made material bag. After sorting them into categories, Alan, Vesemir, and Leto set off again. Unlike in the game, the mountain road leading to Kaer Morhen couldn't be ridden on horseback. Generally, Witchers would leave their horses in the village at the foot of the mountain and hike up. Alan's group didn't have horses either. In the rugged mountain forest, they went along the direction of the water flow, looking for the next group of drowners. Since noon, Vesemir seemed to subconsciously avoid interacting with Alan. Alan didn't mind. He took the opportunity to open the treasure chest. Looking at the inventory with a total of 10 treasure chests, Alan licked his lips satisfactorily and quickly opened half of them. Ding! Drowner treasure chest 5 opened, obtained, small experience orb 3, rotten flesh 2. The small experience orbs were okay, but what use were these rotten flesh for? Just to fill up the treasure chest inventory? Alan shook his head, hesitating whether to open the remaining 5 treasure chests today. He looked up at the angle of the sun. It was still early, probably around 3 in the afternoon. I'll open them. Alan made up his mind. They were just drowner treasure chests, being so frugal was too petty. Ding! Drowner treasure chest 5 opened. Among the 4 white lights, there was one mixed with blue. How many colors were there in these treasure chests? Alan couldn't help but comment. White was the worst, gold should be top tier, so where did blue stand? Somewhere in between? Which game doesn't mark the probability of obtaining items? Sure enough, it's a trashy game. Alan continued to look. Obtained, Drowner Whistle 1, Small Experience Orb 4, switching to the item panel, he checked the information on the Drowner Whistle. Name, Drowner whistle. Type, bait flute. Function, blowing the drowner whistle emits a sound that attracts drowners. Note, Witcher plus drowner whistle. Alan vaguely felt that this whistle had many uses. But he didn't need it now. If he suddenly pulled out a whistle with Vesemir and Leto still around and said he could summon drowners, wouldn't he be taken for a fool? However, the drowner whistle was a very useful item. At least opening these 10 treasure chests wasn't a loss. After opening the chests, Alan also took a look at the character panel. Name, Alan. Age, 13. Title, Son of Miracles. Level, 3. Health, 100%. Stamina 80 out of 80. Attributes, Strength 6.1, Agility 6.2, Constitution 8, Perception 8.9, Mystery 4.3, Special Skills, Witcher Level 1, Appraisal Level 1, Tracking Level 1, Skills, Wolf School Two-Handed Sword Level 2, 0 out of 500, Kunin Level 1, 0 out of 100, Formula, Slaughter Whale, Unavailable, Items, Drowner Heart Essence 16, Rotten Flesh 5, Small Experience Orb 58, Drowner Whistle 1, 23 Cooking Methods for Drowners, Evaluation, Mediocre. The tracking skill appeared on the panel, and Alan's character level had also risen to level 3 after completing the mission. The tracking skill automatically appeared in Alan's mind. Just as he was about to try out the newly acquired skill. Alan, come over here and try to find this group of drowners. Vesemir crouched in the grass by the stream, kicking the grass with his right foot. Alan closed the panel and walked over to Vesemir's side, carefully observing. This clump of grass was close to the water source, shimmering with water droplets everywhere. Obviously, the method of observing mucus reflection and tracking traces couldn't be used here. Vesemir deliberately chose such a location. But, it's a good time, Alan thought to himself. Tracking. The moment the skill was activated, the world as observed by Alan's naked eye darkened slightly. The originally fresh and natural streamside grassland now showed many messy crimson claw prints, uniformly extending in the direction of the water flow into the distance. Out of curiosity, he walked up to one of the deep red traces, wanting to see how the Witcher's journal determined these traces. Alan squatted down, focusing on the moment of the claw print, and his field of vision changed. Can it still be like this? Chapter 22, Did he find it? Leto couldn't help but ask. The apprentice didn't speak, but his footsteps followed Vesemir's indicated location, walking east along the river bank. Obviously, he found something. I don't know. Vesemir raised the edge of his broad-brimmed hat, his gaze lingering on Alan. After all, it's common sense that water creatures live by the water. Even if you don't track the traces, following the direction of the river, you can definitely find these water creatures. Leto chuckled. Want to bet? I bet Alan found the trace. No bet. Vesemir rolled his eyes and quickly dispelled Leto's fantasy. The same mistake. How could the Master Witcher make it twice? Elsa was still dangling behind Alan. Ignoring Leto's disappointed expression, Vesemir walked to Alan's side and asked, How is it? Did you find it? It should be east along the river bank. Vesemir neither agreed nor disagreed, then asked, How did you judge? Alan pondered for a moment. Seeing the apprentice's silence, Vesemir thought he had guessed it intuitively. Little did Vesemir know that there was so much valid information in Alan's field of view that he didn't know where to start. As he approached the traces, the red light that formed the paw prints danced and turned into small red dots. These dots combined into a pair of red legs below the knees, with webbed feet. A few seconds later, these legs moved. The red claws fell from midair and landed on the grass. Some of the dots were shaken off and scattered on the grass around the claws. The main part also, at the moment of landing, reassembled the paw prints as if ants returning to their nest. This operation was really a meal. Alan bent over and pointed to the green grass with red dots, saying, The drops on these grasses are all mucus from the water creatures. After looking at it for a moment, Vesemir brushed the green grass with his right hand and sniffed it in front of his nose. Yes, with the stench of mud, it's from the water creatures. He brushed over a few more green grasses. Vesemir stood up, looked at Alan with suspicion, and asked, How did you see with your naked eye that this is mucus from the water creature? I have a clue. Alan's face showed the standard look of ignorance. Just use your eyes to see, isn't it simple? Can't Master Vesemir do it? Vesemir was stunned for a moment, then quickly shook his head and said, Of course, I can track the traces of water creatures, but... Never mind, you continue. This is just to confirm that the water creature passed through here. How did you determine its direction of departure? The way the Master Witcher changed the topic was still so awkward. Alan certainly wouldn't let go, going downhill, confidently saying, Knowing the distribution of this mucus gives you the answer. He stood up, his fingertips simulating the fall of mucus, and said to the curious Vesemir and Leto, The mucus falls on the grass in a splatter pattern due to speed. Because of the direction of the slope and the vegetation's cover, it's easy to determine. This water creature is heading east along the creek. Vesemir pondered for a moment at his words. Alan's judgment coincided with the answer in his mind. However, the apprentice's judgment method was different from his. Vesemir was silent for a moment, sighed, and said, "Your judgment is correct, but now let me teach you another method. Listen carefully. Tracking, the most important part of the knowledge passed down by the Wolf School mentors to their apprentices. This is often the secret that every witcher keeps, their means of livelihood. In the past, only after surviving the trial of the mountains would apprentices have the opportunity to learn this knowledge. After the second spring equinox of the trial of the mountains, the school would assign apprentices to witchers descending from the mountains. Within 5 years, these apprentices would travel the continent with the witchers until the witcher deemed the apprentice ready to graduate, becoming a true witcher. The witchers of the Wolf School jokingly refer to this as the trial of travel. The relationship between witcher mentors and apprentices gradually becomes closer during these travels, as skills and experiences are continuously imparted and shared in contracts that involve life and death. Ultimately, a unique mentor-apprentice relationship is formed within the Wolf School. Leto was once Vesemir's traveling apprentice. Vesemir himself was once a chief traveling apprentice. Of course, most witcher mentor-apprentice relationships can be traced back to the chief. Vision, smell, hearing, touch. A witcher's senses are flawless. Vesemir walked to the grass analyzed by Alan. For example, what caught my attention in this thicket wasn't vision, but smell. Smell? Alan sniffed. Despite the modification of his body with potions, the scent in his nasal cavity was only the freshness of grass and the faint stench of soil. Yes, when I walked into this area, my sense of smell alerted me that something was wrong here. Vesemir turned his head slightly, noticing the increasing movement of the apprentice's nose, and a slight smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It's not about inhaling more air, you need to learn to distinguish. Vesemir stood up, pressing his index finger on the right side of the apprentice's nose and said, "Close your eyes, control the mutated organ here." At Vesemir's words, Alan closed his eyes, but he couldn't feel any mutated organ where Vesemir was pointing. Discard human cognition, you are a witcher, you can control your body more than you imagine. With Vesemir's index finger pressing, Alan seemed to really feel different. His heart beat rapidly, and blood carried energy throughout his body. "I feel it," Alan exclaimed with surprise. There were actually doors on both sides of his nose. Unfortunately. Originally, these two doors were about to open, but because of Alan's emotional fluctuations, they hid again. But it's okay. Ding. Discovered skill, tracking, a clue. Would you like to spend one small experience speed to unlock the skill? Alan? Alan quickly opened the character panel. Tracking level 1 inch was still in the special skills column. 2 trackings? Alan was somewhat surprised, but still spent a skill point to unlock it. At this moment, Vesemir felt the mutated organ under his index finger, but due to emotional fluctuations, it hid again. He comforted, "No need to force it, it's normal not to open it the first time. Try again tomorrow, but remember, you can only try once a day." This training was supposed to be conducted only after the trial of the mountains. Alan hadn't even completed the main course potion transformation yet, so perhaps the mutated organ on the side of his nose hadn't been properly adjusted. Master Vesemir. With his eyes closed, Alan's call of just 6 words carried the joy of discovering a new continent. "What's wrong?" Vesemir asked in confusion. I smell it." Chapter 23, Alan closed his eyes. The smell, through the mutated organs on the side of his nose, painted a colorful picture in his mind. The blue arc was the stream. The green line was the grass. And the extremely deep brown block, that was the scent of the dark soil. Alan had never understood synesthesia, a rhetoric common to both worlds, so deeply. He felt as if he had crossed over again, reborn once more. The heavy burden of the mountain trial, which had always weighed on his mind, seemed much lighter now. Alan immersed himself in the world of smells for a long time before he finally opened his eyes. Vesemir and Leto, smiling, stood on the grass, waiting for him to return from the hypersensitive world. "How do you feel?" Vesemir asked. "Fantastic," Alan affirmed without hesitation, then emphasized, "like being reborn." Alan's words inexplicably hit Leto's funny bone. "Ha ha ha, you apprentice, you have a way with words, sounding all scholarly like a wizard. Who taught you?" "Leto. Do you really have a death wish?" "Sorry, I forgot again." Leto apologized quickly, looking grim. Not being able to speak freely seemed more painful for him than death. Leto's pitiful look and the joy of opening a new world made Alan unable to hold back his laughter. Hearing the apprentice's laughter, Vesemir was stunned for a few seconds, then laughed heartily as well. Only Leto, with a gloomy face, looked at the laughing master and apprentice like a resentful wife, helpless against them. The autumn sun was setting. The red glow shone through the branches of the withered trees, illuminating the Witcher apprentice. After dealing with this batch of drowners, Alan and the others would return to Kaer Morhen. No, actually, only Alan and Vesemir would return to Kaer Morhen. Spring was not yet here, and Litho would soon embark on his journey of playing hide-and-seek with the sorceress alone. Splish! A cold gleaming dagger severed the last drowner tongue. Alan put it in his material bag. At this moment, Vesemir and Litho had already knocked out the selected drowners and put them in burlap sacks. Let's go, Alan, we're going home. Vesemir patted the sack in his hand and called out. Litho looked longingly in the direction of Kaer Morhen. Home, I wish I could go back to Kaer Morhen too. Come back with us. Alan joked. During the afternoon hunt, Alan had already bonded with Litho. Vesemir might still carry the burden of a mentor, but Litho had completely let himself go. As he put it, not letting me speak is worse than killing me. Would the respected Lady Velia really kill me? Though he spoke without thinking, Witcher Litho was definitely someone to trust. Or perhaps Litho was trustworthy precisely because he spoke without thinking? Alan pondered this for a long time, finally concluding that it might be an unsolvable chicken or egg question, and pushed it out of his mind. Litho rolled his eyes at the words, sighed gloomily, and said nothing. Following Vesemir's arrangement, Litho picked up 2 sacks and headed back. Alan also carried a sack, following the 2 Witchers. Seeing that neither was paying attention to him, Alan took the opportunity to open the Witcher notebook to organize his findings. Name, Alan, Level 4, Special Skills, Monster Hunting Level 1, Identification Level 1, Tracking Level 1, Skills, School of the Wolf Two-Handed Sword Level 2, Ken Level 1, Tracking Level 1, Items, Drowner's Heart Extract 29, Small Experience Orbs 134, Drowner Whistle 2, Rating, Weak, as expected. There are indeed 2 tracking skills. Alan focused and sensed them. Although they had the same name, these were essentially 2 completely different skills. The special skill tracking was a knowledge system attached to the Witcher notebook. It could be said that this was a manual for tracking using the Witcher notebook. The ordinary skill tracking was more akin to tracking prey by developing the mutated senses of the Witcher. Through comparing these 2 skills, Alan gained a deeper understanding of the difference between the Witcher notebook's special skills and ordinary skills. These 2 types of skills were vastly different. But in Alan's mind, the biggest difference was only 1 point. Ordinary skills belong to Alan, while special skills belong to the Witcher notebook. Skills like two-handed sword, ken, and ordinary tracking could be used even without the Witcher notebook. But as for monster hunting, identification, and special tracking, Alan didn't even know their principles of use, let alone mastering them. Although the Witcher notebook was his external aid, not being able to fully control these special skills occasionally gave Alan a slight sense of loss of control. Of course, this did not prevent the Witcher apprentice from utilizing it. The most crucial thing now was to pass the mountain trial. Thinking of the trial, Alan sighed in his heart and turned his attention to the small experience orbs. In the afternoon, they had found 3 groups of drowners. Besides the initial 8, there were 13 more slain by Alan's sword. Unfortunately, without the task bonus, and with his character level having risen another level, the evaluations for the remaining 2 hunts were not high. The best items from the loot boxes were just a drowner whistle. To unlock alchemy, I still need 9,890 more small experience orbs. Today's total gain is about 100. Alan silently calculated. Still not enough. Unless the morning alchemy classes reduced the required number of small experience orbs by 10 more each day. While thinking this and that in his mind, Alan arrived at the parting point. Vesemir, Alan, I'm leaving. Litho looked up at the majestic castle in the distance, then turned his head to bid farewell to the 2. Perhaps the situation is not so bad, Lady Velia has a good temper after all. Just as he made a new friend and now had to leave, Alan was a bit reluctant and wanted to persuade him to stay. Although sorceresses were known among witchers for being vengeful and ruthless, in Alan's impression, Vera had always been a knowledgeable female figure. Especially after dressing conservatively, except for not wearing glasses, she looked much like those graduate student seniors from his previous life. With Vera's appearance, she must still be the most beautiful one. Alan. Vesemir stopped Alan's attempt to persuade. I believe Lady Velia is not as terrible as the rumors say, but it's useless. Litho must leave. Why? Even if Lady Vera really found out, I could plead for Litho. Ha ha, Alan, I didn't expect you to be so reluctant to part with me. Litho laughed, vigorously ruffling Alan's black hair, interrupting him. Alan struggled hard, but still, like a blue-eyed kitten, was roughly ruffled for over 10 seconds. His strength was still far inferior to Litho's. But it's unnecessary. Litho let go of Alan. Vesemir is right. If I don't leave, There will be big trouble, and this has nothing to do with the sorceress's personality. He raised his hand to stop Alan from continuing to persuade. Facing the golden-red sunset, Litho turned and walked down the mountain with a faint casualness. But after taking only a few steps, he turned back to look at Alan, smiled, and said, "Alan, next year, I will definitely see you at the long table in the castle hall." This was a statement, not a question. But after being stunned for a moment, Alan responded solemnly, as if answering a question, "You will, Litho. You will definitely see me again next year. You definitely will." Chapter 24, watching Litho's figure slowly merge into the red sunset, Vesemir suddenly asked, "Do you know why Litho has to leave?" Alan withdrew his gaze and asked, "Why?" Vesemir adjusted his black wide-brimmed hat, picked up the 4 bags of drowners on the ground, and walked towards the castle while explaining, "It's the rule. Litho offended a senior sorceress, one of the top figures on the northern continent. He has to pay the price for it, and this has nothing to do with Lady Vera's temperament." Alan, carrying his bag of drowners, followed Vesemir and asked, "Even if it was unintentional?" "Even if it was unintentional," Vesemir paused and then continued, "self-imposed exile for a year is already the lightest punishment. If he stays and outsiders find out, even if Lady Vera doesn't intend to do anything, his end will be much more miserable than it is now. You might not understand this now, but even someone as strong as Lady Vera cannot do whatever she wants. She represents a group of interests." Alan raised an eyebrow at this. "A group of interests? Is it the sorceresses?" Speaking to the end, Vesemir shook his head and muttered to himself, "Why am I talking about this with a 13-year-old apprentice?" He turned his head to gaze into his apprentice's eyes and earnestly advised, "In any case, don't dislike Lady Vera because of Litho's matter. This is the trouble Litho brought upon himself by not controlling his mouth. He brought this on himself. Being on good terms with Lady Vera will greatly benefit your future." Seeing Vesemir's concerned and sincere eyes, Alan felt a warmth in his heart. "I understand, Master Vesemir." Seeing that Alan truly took his words to heart, Vesemir nodded in satisfaction. About half an hour later, the sky gradually darkened. It seemed that the banquet in the main castle of Kaer Morhen had reached another climax, as the sounds of lively clamor could faintly be heard even at the apprentice training ground. "Just throw the drowners here." Vesemir opened the cage. Thud. The drowners were thrown into the metal cage. Vesemir locked each of the 5 cages, checked them again, then picked up the black cloth on the ground and covered the cages. "All right, go to Lady Vera to get your dinner and then rest early." Vesemir patted Alan on the shoulder. Alan nodded and then walked towards the south tower. Knock, knock, knock. He gently knocked on the door of the alchemy room. Greek Mary opened the door. The sorceress Vera seemed to be absent from the alchemy room. Alan said, "I am here to get the apprentice's dinner." Mary nodded, went inside, and brought back the exquisite water bag. Alan took the water bag and was about to leave when he suddenly remembered the experiment records and asked, "Mary, has Lady Vera finished reading those experiment records?" Hearing this, Mary's young face immediately tensed up. Her expression became serious and earnest, as if Alan had said something outrageous. "Witcher apprentice. You should call me Lady Mary. Although I am currently studying magic under Lady Vera, I have been a genuine sorceress for 2 years." The girl deliberately emphasized the word apprentice. She was clearly very dissatisfied with Alan addressing her by name. Alan glanced at the genuine sorceress Mary, who looked no older than 15, shrugged, and said, "All right, esteemed Lady Mary, may I ask you to answer this question?" Mary was very pleased with the Witcher apprentice's willingness to correct his mistake. She gently brushed the hair off her forehead, revealing a slightly raised brow, and pretended to be mature as she said, "Of course, Lady Vera hasn't started reading those experiment records yet." "All right then." Alan sighed regretfully and was about to leave. He didn't dare compete with Sorceress Vera for reading the records. At that moment, "Alan, what are you doing here?" A deep male voice came from behind. The Witcher apprentice turned around. He saw that it was the chief of the Wolf School speaking. Following closely behind him, Vera also walked in from the corner. Seeing Alan standing at the door of the alchemy room, the sorceress paused for a moment, then somewhat awkwardly distanced herself from the chief. "Chief, Lady Vera," Alan greeted, "I am here to get dinner." "You came at the right time. I have something to discuss with you." The sorceress nodded, then turned her head expressionlessly and said, "Saul, I'll keep in mind what you just said." "All right, I'll be off then." The chief nodded, bid farewell to Alan and Mary, then turned and left. Alan felt a bit uneasy and asked, "Lady Vera, is there something you wanted to talk to me about?" Litho had to self-exile just for teasing the sorceress a bit. The shock from that incident hadn't yet faded from Alan's mind. At this moment, even his tone of speaking became cautious. The sorceress didn't notice Alan's unease. She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear and inclined her head towards the alchemy room, signaling to go inside to talk. After sitting down inside, Alan felt somewhat anxious, unsure why Vera had called him. He could only empty his mind, trying not to think about anything related to Litho. The loose-tongued witcher hadn't gone far yet. The sorceress didn't sit down. She leaned against the wall next to Alan, looking down into his eyes, and asked, "Alan, can you tell me what it feels like to have the Witcher's eye?" The Witcher apprentice instantly perked up. Finally, it's here. Alan knew there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. The sorceress teaching him alchemy was indeed for the Witcher's eye. Emptying his mind and sticking to the pre-prepared story, Alan said, "I don't know what the Witcher's eye is." The sorceress stared into his eyes, as if reading his mind. "No matter, just tell me what you felt after the trial of the grasses. What's different from other apprentices?" Alan dared not let his mind wander for a moment, continuing to empty his thoughts. "All right, Lady Vera. In combat, after concentrating, I can vaguely see the flow of magic in monsters." This was what the chief had said the first time he used a hunting skill. It was the only characteristic of the Witcher's eye that Alan was sure of. But before Alan could finish speaking, Velia raised her hand, interrupting him. "Why is she stopping me? Did the sorceress notice something?" Alan's emptied mind momentarily froze, and sweat instantly broke out on his forehead. However, the sorceress, after raising her hand to signal a stop, merely ordered behind Alan, "Mary, take notes." "All right, Lady Velia." Mary's voice sounded obedient and soft, even somewhat childlike, lacking any semblance of a genuine sorceress. But at this moment, the Witcher apprentice had no intention of making any remarks. Realizing it was just a false alarm, he desperately emptied his mind again, fearing the sorceress might read something she shouldn't. Even if it was something about Litho, it couldn't happen. Who knew whether the sorceress's true nature was the intellectual and gentle demeanor in class or the cold-blooded terror described by Vesemrind Litho? Alan didn't want to take that risk. Chapter 25, seeing Alan's vacant eyes, the sorceress chuckled softly and shook her head. "Relax, Alan, I'm not reading your mind." No need to read minds. The Witcher apprentice's expression was easy to understand. Although he was skeptical about Vera's words, Alan still pretended to be nonchalant and said, "I'm not nervous, Lady Vera." Looking at Alan's stubborn yet adorable face, Vera's lips unconsciously curled into a doting smile as she coaxed softly, all right, let's continue." Alan, still nervously emptying his mind, didn't notice Vera's smile and said, "I absorb regular meals quickly, but..." "Wait a moment." Alan was interrupted by the sorceress again. Snap! With a snap of her fingers, a delicate water bottle placed on the ground floated up and landed on the alchemy table in front of Alan. "Drink it and show me." Alan tilted his head. The sorceress propped her right hand on her cheek, her expression quite strange. Curiosity, amusement, and a hint of eagerness. It didn't seem like she was digging into some topic or experiment, rather, it looked like she was excitedly watching a good show. If a child from a normal family had time traveled, they would recognize this. This was the expression adults often had during the new year when urging children to perform some special performance. After hesitating for a moment, Alan could only pray that the Witcher's journal would come through and not let the sorceress discover anything unusual. Under Vera's expectant gaze, Alan removed the wooden stopper from the water bottle and took a sip of his portion. "Do you want to use the essence liquid of the Drowner's Heart?" After mentally selecting the option, the familiar alternating currents of hot and cold coursed through his body. The sensation of pain and itching just started to surface before disappearing. Moments later, Vera saw Alan open his eyes and asked eagerly, "Is it over?" "Yes, I've absorbed it all." Mary, who had been eavesdropping, immediately distanced herself from the matter. "Lady Vera, it has nothing to do with me. I just followed the original formula." Vera casually pressed her hand down to stop Mary from continuing. "The first 2 days after the trial of the grasses, you didn't show this special ability. Why?" Alan's heart skipped a beat, and he braced himself and said, "I don't know, it just suddenly happened yesterday." "Really?" When Alan heard the sorceress's question, his heart was in his throat. Just when he thought she was going to dig deeper, Vera surprisingly let the issue go and let him continue. About half an hour later, this interrogation finally ended. During this unbearable time, Alan had to hide his thoughts, make up stories, and even perform the Witcher's eye ability like a monkey for the sorceress. Fighting drowners all afternoon wouldn't have been this exhausting. Finally, the torment ended. "All right, Alan, thank you for your cooperation. Glad to be of help." Alan forced a smile, quickly got up, and prepared to leave this hell. Wait a moment. Hearing those 3 words, Alan couldn't help but tremble. Every torment from the sorceress began with those 3 words. Now, those syllables gave Alan a shadow. What is it? Lady Vera? Honestly, Alan was at his limit. If he were sure he could beat the sorceress, he would have gone all out. You haven't used the Mirage Pendant, have you? Alan froze for a moment, then took the pendant out from his collar. If the sorceress hadn't mentioned it, he would have almost forgotten he had a magical accessory. When he first got the pendant, Alan tried it privately, but no matter what, he couldn't figure out how to use it. At the time, Alan thought he didn't have enough magic power to use the pendant. After learning the signs, he realized it wasn't just about magic power. The pendant was rejecting him. It refused to let Alan's magic enter its body. As if it wasn't a pendant but a living creature. The Witcher apprentice, who had never encountered magical accessories, instinctively rejected this bizarre feeling of neither life nor death. Seeing that the chief and the sorceress hadn't mentioned it, he didn't think to ask. Of course, it was also because the chief left in a hurry, and the sorceress had asked about the Witcher's eye. Give me the pendant. Vera extended her slender, fair right hand. Alan didn't hesitate and directly took off the necklace, handing it to the sorceress. The sorceress took the necklace, traced the edge of the pendant's gemstone counterclockwise with her index finger, and then returned it to Alan. Alan took the pendant and glanced at the sorceress. Inject your magic into it, like how you cast a sign, Vera explained with a smile. Alan nodded, took a deep breath, mobilized his mutated organ, extracted a bit of magic, and cautiously injected it into the pendant. The magic was instantly absorbed, and the gemstone on the pendant seemed to flash with a white light, then dimmed as if it lacked energy. Don't be afraid, inject all your magic. The sorceress's voice was gentle and intimate, making Alan look up. Vera's smile was also full of encouragement. For some reason, Alan saw a sense of benevolence in that beautiful face. Benevolence? He quickly dismissed the thought from his mind. It was all the master's fault. Knowing the sorceress was older than Vesemir's grandfather's grandfather, the more he looked at her 18-year-old-like face, the more he felt a deep sense of benevolence. The key was that these two feelings weren't contradictory, perfectly blended together. Making the Witcher apprentice involuntarily feel dependent. Was this also part of the sorceress's magic? Alan muttered in his heart and quickly stopped the baseless guesses. If the sorceress knew what he was thinking, neither he nor Vesemir would see tomorrow's sun. Refocusing on the pendant's gemstone, Alan no longer hesitated and poured all the magic from his mutated organ into the magical accessory. In an instant, the translucent gemstone seemed to breathe, flickering. A close connection formed between the gemstone and Alan's soul. The Witcher apprentice was surprised to find that this mirage pendant was truly alive. Thud Mary, who had been openly eavesdropping, fell to the ground. This time, due to her posture, her head didn't land on the alchemy table. Hearing the noise, Alan quickly turned to look. Ignore her, she's just sleepy. Vera said lightly. Alan had many complaints but dared not voice them. He could only pretend he saw nothing and refocus on the seemingly alive pendant. Lady Vera understood Alan's expression and chuckled. Yes, this gemstone is alive. She's called the Mirage Pearl, appearing after a conjunction of the spheres. Since the ancients arrived on this continent by boat, less than 3 Mirage Pearls have been discovered. 2 of them are now lost. So the one I have is the only one in the world? Alan couldn't help but exclaim. At least it's the only one I know of, Vera replied. Chapter 26, the humble tone barely concealed the pride within. Perhaps the sorceress didn't intend to hide it at all. The Witcher apprentice was stunned for a moment, then fell silent. If what the sorceress said was true, then the value of this Mirage Pearl. Wondering why such a precious item was given to you? A gentle female voice interrupted his contemplation. Alan gazed at the sorceress, his heart stirring. At that moment, he had a premonition. The sorceress's next words would drag him into a vast and unfathomable wave. Vera stared intently at those deep blue cat-like eyes, as if wanting to hide their gem-like depth and purity in the safest place within her heart. The sorceress said, "Know this, the time of sword and axe is near, and it heralds the age of the White Wolf's snowstorm." This was the prophecy of the Sirith-Lin. Among the few prophecies in the Witcher series, Alan remembered this one clearly. It spoke of how only the inheritors of the Elder Blood could save the world from the White Frost. But what did this have to do with Alan? Was he the inheritor of the Elder Blood? As Alan pondered, he continued to listen. The world will perish in the White Frost and be reborn under a new sun. Eschoathesi. This is inevitable. Watch for the signs. To know what the signs are. First, Filius Miraculi, the child of miracle, will be born in a land of bitter cold. The initially calm Alan's pupils suddenly contracted upon hearing the last line the sorceress chanted. Different from the original text? And the child of miracle, wasn't that him? Alan quickly opened his character panel to check. Name, Alan, age, 13, title, Child of Miracle. It was indeed him. He had always thought the title Child of Miracle was just a useless label. The sorceress's chanting didn't stop for Alan's contemplation. Death and rebirth, The non-human will bring blood and fire. Unnoticed, the cold and lofty female voice disappeared. The Witcher apprentice remained silent for a long time. The entire alchemy chamber was silent. However, at this moment, Alan's heart was not as calm as his appearance suggested. Child of miracle to save the world? Then what about the elder blood? Where had the elder blood gone? Everything was in chaos. Alan's shock wasn't just because he heard the term child of miracle from someone else for the first time. Most importantly, the prophecy no longer mentioned the elder blood. Yesterday, when he learned that Witchers could only use Witcher potions, Alan thought he had traveled to the world of the Witcher novels. But without the elder blood, were the future events he knew still valid? So you know? Vera asked. What? Alan was taken aback. The child of miracle will save the world from the white frost, the sorceress said nonchalantly. Your responsibility is heavy. This Mirage Pearl is just a little advance investment for the child of miracle. Wow. That's quite an investment. Starting with a rare Mirage Pearl, what would they use to bind him in the future? The sorceress wasn't a competent capitalist, she seemed more like a gambler. She bet everything on one move. Are you so sure? I am the child of miracle? The Witcher apprentice was so surprised that he even dropped his respectful tone. The sorceress fell silent for a moment. Then, in a complex tone that was hard for others to understand, she murmured, You are the child of miracle. You must be the child of miracle. You have to be the child of miracle. Otherwise, what? Nothing. You are the child of miracle. Vera shook her head sadly, then reassured him with a complicated expression. Don't worry, even if you aren't, I won't take back the Mirage Pearl. After a moment of silence, Vera massaged her temples as if she had a headache and said, There's nothing else, you can leave now. Alan looked at the sorceress who suddenly seemed disinterested, confused. Capriciousness was evidently not just a trait of women in his previous life. But the sorceress had already issued a dismissal order, so no matter how many questions Alan had, he dared not ask any more. After all, he was only a future savior, not the present one. After Alan left the alchemy chamber, Vera stood leaning against the wall for a long time. Snap. A finger snap. The door to the inner chamber of the alchemy room opened. Come out, Alan has left, the sorceress said, her melancholy gone. A man with 2 swords on his back emerged from the inner chamber, covered in dust on his arms, shoulders, and hair. The secret paths of Kaer Morhen are really hard to navigate. If I had known. Huh? What happened to Mary? She's asleep, Vera said casually. Saul was speechless. How big of a nerve did one need to sleep like that in front of her? He looked at Mary, who was lying awkwardly on the ground, and couldn't help but suggest, do we really have to do it this way? Can't we just find an excuse to send Mary away? Vera said coolly, she's my apprentice. Saul understood the sorceress's implication and sighed. He picked up Mary by her collar and placed her on the alchemy table. Vera watched with her arms crossed, saying nothing. So, how's the experimental record coming along? Seeing Vera's lack of enthusiasm, Saul got straight to the point. Still working on it. So, it's not done yet. Saul nodded, as if he understood the sorceress well. I just arrived at Kaer Morhen, and you already gave me a troublesome task. Vera's anger flared up. You need to know, I didn't come here to work for you. The Witcher was pushed back 2 steps by the sorceress's imposing manner. He scratched his head, unable to figure out how he had offended Vera this time. Sorry, I mentioned it casually back then, not expecting it to have such a big impact. It's only the 2nd day, and many Witchers have started asking me about the Witcher's Eye. Some who hadn't read a book in 100 years are asking me for the experiment records. Seeing that Vera's expression hadn't softened, Saul paused and added, Hey. Who knew our child would be so excellent? If he could act like a normal apprentice, there wouldn't be so many troubles. That's my child. The sorceress's tone was still harsh but had softened a lot compared to earlier. The Witcher shrugged, thinking, without me, could you have had the child alone? What's impossible? Do you know who I am? Evidently, the chief Witcher of the Wolf School, Saul, had no immunity from mind reading. Saul remained silent, avoiding any futile arguments with the sorceress. He was a bit confused. They were all so old now, how could they still act like children? Snap. Another finger snap. The roaring wolf head medallion instantly jumped out from under his collar, vibrating wildly and making a buzzing sound. Saul instinctively traced a triangle in the air with his thumb and forefinger. In the blink of an eye, the almost tangible Ken sign was tightly adhered to the dark red Gampson. Visemur's Ken sign was already strong enough. But whether in terms of casting speed or sign intensity, Saul's Ken was much stronger than Visemur's. Unfortunately, these advantages didn't prevent the Witcher from being thrown by telekinesis. The sorceress's telekinesis didn't even trigger Kin's auto-defense and tossed the Witcher back into the secret path like trash. Bang! Instantly. The secret path, which had never been cleaned since its construction, filled with dust. Yet the dust was magically contained within the secret path. Moments later, Saul walked back into the alchemy chamber, completely covered in dust. Brushing off the dust, the Witcher suddenly heard the sorceress's cold voice. Alan knows about the prophecy. Chapter 27. After leaving the alchemy room, Alan did not go directly back to the apprentice dormitory. In the sorceress' place, the Witcher apprentices only linked the Mirage Pearl with their internal magic, without yet trying its effectiveness. Finding a secluded corner where no one was around, he took out the Mirage Pearl for identification. Name, Mirage Pearl. Type, Magic Sprite. Function, consumes a small amount of magic to create a magical mirage. Note, do you really think illusions can't kill people? Magic Sprite? So, the bead on this pendant is actually a new form of life. It was already late, and there were still 3 hungry apprentices in the dormitory, so Alan didn't think too much about the existence of the Mirage Pearl. In the manner of casting a spell seal, Alan injected the magic from the mutated organ into the Mirage Pearl. The feeling of being intimately connected reappeared in his mind. The Witcher apprentice instinctively mobilized magic and transported it to the Mirage Pearl with a special transmission rhythm. Barely audible buzzing. A faint mist seeped out of the Mirage Pearl. A water ghost suddenly appeared in front of him. The muscle texture and posture were clear, but the only flaw was that this water ghost was stiff and motionless. Just as Alan was thinking about how to make the illusion move, a dull pain came from the left side of his heart. The illusion in front of him also disappeared after a wave of ripples. In an instant, Alan's face turned pale, his body weakened, and he sat directly on the ground. Ding! Hidden attribute magic unlocked, the familiar mechanical sound rang in his ears, but the Witcher apprentice had no interest in checking. His vision was dim, with countless twinkling white spots. It took nearly half an hour before he slowly recovered. After a slight panting, Alan staggered to his feet, pondering the significance of unlocking magic. The way of casting spells between sorcerers and witchers is different. Sorcerers perceive the energy of chaos, allow elemental forces to pass through themselves, and then integrate them through spells, gestures, rituals, and other means before releasing them in a regular form. Simply put, the sorcerer's body is just an intermediary in the process of magic release, serving to filter and integrate. The body itself does not have organs that store magic. Witchers, on the other hand, regardless of whether they originally had the talent to become sorcerers, will gain the ability to release spell seals after modification. The energy for releasing spell seals comes from their mutated organs. A witcher's mutated organs will spontaneously absorb chaos energy floating in the air. Because the magic released by the spell seal is tamed by the mutated organs, witchers do not need the complicated spells, gestures, and rituals to organize energy, so the release of the seal is often quick and accurate. However, the energy storage capacity of mutated organs is limited, so the damage caused by spell seals is mostly inferior to the magic obtained directly from nature by sorcerers. Of course, compared to the consumption of releasing spell seals, mutated organs absorb magic much faster. Simply casting spells does not deplete the magic in mutated organs at all, instead, it consumes more physical energy. Displayed on the panel, releasing spell seals consumes stamina rather than conventional magic points. But now, all the magic in the mutated organs has been completely drained, and the Witcher's diary actually prompted him to unlock magic. A new attribute. Looking at the still lingering identification information next to the Mirage Pearl, Alan couldn't help but complain in his heart, this is called consuming a small amount of magic? This Mirage Pearl has drained me dry, even unlocking hidden attributes. It's really beyond expectations. However, the potential of the Mirage Pearl is still considerable. In a battle, life and death are often decided in a moment. If Alan can master the use of the Mirage Pearl proficiently, he can create that moment himself. The recovery time just now took too long, so Alan had to hurry back to the student dormitory with his body slightly recovered. When he arrived at the dormitory, 3 annoying little sparrows were sitting chattering on the bed near the door. Seeing Alan come in, they all rushed over in a flurry. Their eager expressions made Alan think they were urgently digesting dinner, causing a slight guilt to well up in his heart. But, Alan, did you see any other monsters outside today? This was Bond. Alan, how did you manage it today? You released the kin seal so quickly. This was Fred. Did you go down the mountain? I heard Lithos say there's delicious stew in the village below the mountain. Is that true? This was Hughes. They're all so lively during lunch. Alan was already drained by the Mirage Pearl, and now he had to endure the spiritual torment of the Witcher apprentices when he returned to the dormitory. Pressing his right hand against his temple, which was throbbing incessantly due to the noise, Alan raised the water bag in his hand and said, Aren't you all eager to have dinner? We have classes tomorrow morning. Fred waved his hand dismissively, saying with an air of old age, studying monsters, it's fine. Skipping that class isn't a big deal. Even if we listen, we can't follow. It's better to learn the Quinceal with you tonight and rest tomorrow morning. Hughes and Bon nodded repeatedly in agreement. Master Vesemur's Monster Studies course is indeed very simple in style, only slightly better than various meetings from his previous life. Moreover, Alan still had the essence of the water ghost's heart. Even without discussing pity for the weak, they could learn more, and the probability of dragging him behind during high-altitude trials would be much smaller. Moreover, with the ability to save, who would be willing to watch these innocent lives disappear at an age when they should have been full of potential? Therefore, Alan skipped Leto's blunt talk and roughly described the afternoon hunting process before starting to instruct them on the kin seal. Level 1 kin involves comprehensive knowledge. In terms of seal strength and proficiency, Alan is far inferior to Master Vesemur. But when it comes to teaching these apprentices, Master Vesemur, also a genius, may not necessarily understand their pain points. For example, the part about mobilizing internal pheromones to give instructions to mutated organs. All three apprentices had problems and didn't understand Master Vesemur's answer. This is precisely because Master Vesemur's physical fitness is too strong. The amount of internal pheromones he can mobilize is like a torrent compared to the apprentices, naturally not needing to find the shortest transmission path. And these entry-level contents are all in the memory of the level 1 kin seal. So the apprentices learn quickly, and after about an hour, most of them could release the kin seal completely. Even Hughes took only an hour and a half to release a pockmarked light yellow shield. Alan, did you see that? I used Ken. Hughes happily rushed to Alan. Admiration was written all over his excited little face. Alan, why don't you just teach us seals from now on? Chapter 28. Looking at the admiring expressions on the faces of the three young sparrows, Alan felt secretly pleased. Unfortunately, he couldn't replace Vesemur to teach them. On the one hand, he had his own things to do. After learning the law seal in the morning, he had to go to the alchemy room to study alchemy. On the other hand, although Vesemur's teaching style was very plain, he was indeed a serious and responsible mentor. Due to the difference in their abilities between him and the apprentices, Vesemur might find it difficult to correct the apprentices' detailed problems. But at least when explaining the law seal, Vesemur did his best to impart his knowledge to the apprentices as much as possible. That's enough. Alan could come back in the evening to correct their mistakes. This would be more efficient. After finally calming the apprentices down and having a dinner with added ingredients, Alan lay on the bed, thinking about everything that happened at night. The purpose of the selfless dedication of the sorceress has been revealed, and Alan has also put down a big stone in his heart. At least from the current situation, neither the chief nor Vera had any plans to harm him. As for the prophecy, can the future really be predicted? In a trance, Alan heard the clear and distant voice of the sorceress again. To know the signs. First, Filius Miraculi, son of miracles, is born in the bitter cold. Death and rebirth, the non-human brings blood and fire. After lying back on the bed, these words lingered in Alan's ears, like a curse. Born in bitter cold. Death and rebirth. Alan pondered, these are all things that have already happened, so they are not important for the time being. The key is the non-human brings blood and fire. Does the non-human refer to him? And what does blood and fire refer to? War? I don't want to think about it. Alan sighed deeply. How can anyone see the future course from such vague statements? Now the most important thing is the trial through the mountains. As for this inexplicable prophecy, let's think about it after the trial. Knowing the prophecy, Alan's life did not change. The next day, Alan went to the apprentice training ground as usual with the apprentices, and then went to Vera's class before the practical class began. Yes, Vesemur exempted Alan from the practical class. You don't need such practical training anymore. Don't waste the drowners you caught so hard. This were the original words of the Master Witcher. After finishing the alchemy class at noon, Vesemur would take the initiative to go to the alchemy room to find Alan and take him out to hunt drowners in Kaer Morhen. The Master Witcher seemed to have forgotten that taking Alan to Kaer Morhen yesterday was just incidental, and the main purpose was to capture drowners as practical class materials. Alan did not remind him, just silently kept this kindness in his heart. After hunting, taking meals, taking medicine, practicing mirage pearls, teaching law seals, inventorying harvests, sleeping. The daily life of a Witcher apprentice became more regular. Except for the day when the character level was raised to level 5 and triggered a hunting task to kill 200 drowners. For a week in a row, Alan lived at this pace. He also thought that this kind of life would continue until the trial through the mountains. Unfortunately, on the 7th day, something unexpected happened. Snap a snap. The book on the alchemy table slowly returned to its original position in front of Alan. This scene has happened in front of Alan 9 times. He got up as usual, just about to say goodbye to Vera and Mary, when the sorceress suddenly stopped him. Alan, starting from tomorrow, I will leave Kaer Morhen for a while. Alan, who was about to reach the door, turned around in an instant, looking at Vera in surprise. The sorceress is leaving? What about his alchemy? The prompt for unlocking alchemy skills is still lingering in the corner of his vision. Do you want to spend 7,120 small experience pearls to unlock this skill? Different from the original plan. Alan thought that unlocking skills would rely on hunting drowners, and the reduced demand during the alchemy class was just an additional factor. But since the 4th alchemy class, after Vera asked him to practice making the simplest hemostatic potion, the degree of demand reduction soared rapidly. Instead, the progress of hunting stagnated due to the hunting task of killing 200 drowners. The hunting task does not improve the hunting evaluation, and Alan's level has been raised due to several law seal skills. This resulted in very few experience pearls rewarded for each hunt. Therefore, the reduction in the requirement of nearly 3,000 small experience pearls made Alan feel much better about hunting drowners every day. At this rate, even if he doesn't kill drowners, he can steadily unlock alchemy before the trial through the mountains. After a brief pause, Vera explained again, as for how long specifically, I'm not sure. It's something your chief commissioned for investigation. What can a Witcher apprentice say? The sorceress is free, and she is also a pivotal figure. She must have her own work and social relationships. From the beginning, he knew this, but he always took it for granted because of the kindness of the sorceress. Moreover, even if it is an investment in his future, Miss Vera has done enough. After a moment of silence, Alan pulled out his most sincere smile and said, "It's okay, Miss Vera. If you are willing to teach me alchemy, I am already very grateful." Upon hearing this, Vera stood up silently, walked to Alan's side. The smell of oranges mixed with cardamom gradually intensified. The sorceress reached out her right hand, gently raised it, as if she wanted to touch Alan's hair. Alan was stunned for a moment, but did not dodge. In these days of teaching, even the suspicious Alan could feel Vera's kindness. The sorceress taught him so much knowledge so seriously, what's wrong with touching his head a few times? But to Alan's surprise, the sorceress's hand did not come down. Instead of seeing him bow obediently, she shook for a moment, then slowly withdrew. Then, the sorceress just looked at Alan, the Witcher apprentice, quietly and seriously for a long time. Although her face was expressionless, the complexity in the sorceress's eyes was hard for Alan to understand even in 2 lifetimes. He could only stand there uncomfortably, not daring to think about anything in his mind. After a long sigh, Vera turned her head and shouted, "Mary." "Miss Vera, I'm here," Mary responded instantly. "For these days, you will teach Alan alchemy." "Ah. What? You don't want to?" Vera turned her head and glanced at Mary. Her emotionless gaze, genuine sorceress, made Mary's hair stand up instantly, and she hurriedly replied, "I'm willing. I'm willing." Taking back her gaze, Vera hesitated for a moment, then turned her head and asked, "Alan, are you still insisting on making potions yourself?" Chapter 29, I'm not sure if I'll be able to return before the mountain trial. If you want me to do it, this might be your last chance. Vera's tone was very sincere. But Alan had no choice and had to refuse again. "Sorry, Lady Vera. I still want to do it myself." The sorceress's eyes dimmed slightly, but she still earnestly reminded him, "All right. My library will be open to you. If you have any questions or need any materials, you can ask Mary directly, she will help you." The sorceress rambled on for quite a while. As Alan listened, he suddenly felt like he was Vera's apprentice. Meanwhile, a certain genuine apprentice was glaring at Alan, her cheeks flushed with jealousy. The burning jealousy in her eyes almost set Alan's hair on fire. After about half an hour, the sorceress finally stopped. "That's about it, you can go now." Alan nodded sincerely and thanked her. "Thank you, Lady Vera." "No need to thank me," Vera shook her head, then solemnly said, "You just need to tell me. You will definitely pass the mountain trial safely, right?" The Witcher apprentice nodded vigorously and firmly said, "Don't worry, Lady Vera. I will definitely pass the mountain trial and not let your investment go to waste." "Investment?" The sorceress inexplicably laughed twice. For the Wolf School Witchers, their promises are more important than life. "Alan, I remember your promise." After leaving the alchemy room and ascending 2 more levels, the Witcher apprentice stopped. He opened his character panel mentally. Name, Alan, age, 13, title, Miracle Child, level, 8, health, 100%, stamina, 150 out of 150, mana, 87 out of 87, attributes, strength 9.6, plus 3.5. Agility 9.6, plus 3.4, Constitution 15, plus 6.1, Perception 14.9, plus 6, Mysticism 8.7, plus 4.4, Special Skills, Witcher Hunting Level 1, Identification Level 1, Tracking Level 1, Special Skill Points, 1, Skills, Wolves School Two-Handed Sword Level 2, Tracking Level 1, Ken Level 1, Ard Level 1, Yrden Level 1, Igni Level 2, Recipes, Killer Whale, Unavailable, Items, Drowner Heart Essence 162, Rotten Flesh 87, Small Experience Orbs 1445, Drowner Whistle 7, Evaluation, Novice. In these 7 days, Alan had increased about 24 points in attributes, making him a completely different person compared to a few days ago. To exaggerate a little, Alan could now fight 10 versions of his former self who had just arrived in this world. Unfortunately, the effectiveness of the heart essence was diminishing as Alan's attributes increased. After his strength attribute reached 9 points, it took 10 essences to increase it by 0.2, and his constitution attribute stopped increasing after reaching 13 points, regardless of the essence used. This was, of course, expected. But it shattered Alan's dream of becoming a god by slaughtering drowners. Therefore, Alan kept the remaining essences for future use as stamina recovery potions. In terms of skills, Alan only had 2 signs left to learn. Due to the fire attack's special effectiveness against drowners, he had specifically upgraded the Igni sign to level 2. The simultaneous improvement in attributes and skills had significantly increased Alan's efficiency in hunting drowners. Unfortunately, as his character level also increased to level 8 with the skill upgrades, he hadn't seen any higher level hunt evaluations for a while. Moreover, most of his hunting time was spent on traveling and tracking. So, although his hunting efficiency had improved, the number of small experience orbs he earned daily did not increase explosively. Currently, Alan's average daily hunt had stayed at around 25 drowners for the past few days. It was manageable until today, as Vera's alchemy classes had provided a solid foundation, so he didn't miss out on a few drowners each day. But tomorrow, it would be Mary teaching. To be honest, Alan had little confidence in Mary, who had only been a sorceress for 2 years, regarding alchemy. Now he just needed to see how much her classes would differ from Vera's. With over 5,000 small experience orbs still missing, I won't be able to gather them without changing my hunting method. After some thought, Alan made up his mind. He had to make a change. Since the problem was the hunting efficiency, all he needed to do was to increase it. After thinking for a while, Alan stood up and walked to the agreed place. As soon as he left the tower, Alan saw a Witcher greeting Visumr. Visumr, aren't you going to the banquet today? No, I have something to do later. You go ahead, I'll join you later. The Witcher master patted the man's shoulder. The man shrugged, muttered something, and then left. Alan lingered in the shadow of the tower for a few more seconds before walking towards Visumr. The Witcher master nodded at the approaching apprentice and then turned to walk outside the castle. Master Visumr, if you're busy, I can go hunting by myself. Walking alongside Visumr, Alan thought for a moment and suggested. Visumr didn't look back and casually replied, no need, just drinking anyway, going later is the same. But it wasn't the same. Alan knew this very well. Throughout the year, the Witchers only had these 2 months together. By the same time next year, they might not see the same people they saw this year. After all, Witchers are warriors and hunters. It's a highly dangerous profession that relies on fighting and hunting to survive. A Witcher could lose his life due to inaccurate information, betrayal, or even just the human hatred for non-humans. Because the people they see this year might not be around next year. That's why the castle hall of the ancient sea fortress would have a bonfire burning all night, with endless drinks and delicious food. Compared to the expensive charcoal, wine, and delicacies, the time spent with comrades was the most precious. Every moment of his time was not to be wasted. So, it wasn't the same. Even though Alan selfishly hoped that Visumr would let him hunt alone, he was too moved to persuade otherwise now. Visumr, are you taking our little killer out hunting again? Alan looked up and saw an unfamiliar Witcher. He's Dante, a respected Witcher master. Visumr introduced. Alan nodded and greeted the Witcher across from him as usual. For some reason unknown to Alan, he seemed to have quite a reputation among the returning Witchers. Walking down the road, unfamiliar Witchers would often greet him. The titles ranged from Warren's Apprentice, Lucky Apprentice, Second Man of Elsa, to the recent titles after the Drowner Hunts, Drowner Slayer, Little Butcher of Kaer Morhen, and so on. Alan had asked Visumr about this a few days ago. But the Witcher master just had a dark look on his face, sighed as if remembering something, shook his head, and didn't give an answer. His expression was quite strange. Alan didn't delve further, as it wasn't important to him. Chapter 30, Evening. Blue Mountain Range. Croak croak, the sound of drowners echoed faintly from the depths of the forest. Alan, who was using Witcher senses to search for tracks, closed the mutated organs on the sides of his nose upon hearing the sound. In his vision, the red mist produced by the sensory connection of his sense of smell disappeared abruptly. The Witcher apprentice glanced back at Vesemir, who nodded, signaling him to move freely. Alan nodded in return and cautiously followed the sound of the drowners' cries. Even though he had already determined the enemy was drowners based on tracks and sounds, the Witcher apprentice did not let his guard down. Caution allows Witchers to live longer. This was a direct quote from the Witcher Master. No single sense can confirm the enemy's type and number with 100% certainty. Sense of smell, hearing, sight, and magical perception, none can be absent in a hunt. Furthermore, due to the weakness of Witcher's magical perception, it is more prudent to wear the school medallion during hunts. Crossing a dirt pit and stepping over soft grass step by step. The shrill cries of the drowners drew nearer. 2 bare maple trees couldn't obscure the Witcher apprentice's view. By the river, 7 drowners came into Alan's sight. Using his 4 senses alternately, Alan confirmed that no other monsters were hiding nearby. The Witcher apprentice positioned himself precisely at the boundary of the drowner's perception. Drawing his sword, the magical power within him surged abruptly. With his left thumb and index finger slightly curved, he traced a triangle in the air in front of him. Ken's shield of faint yellow light flickered on Alan's brand new dark leather armor. All preparations complete, the Witcher apprentice no longer hesitated. With a powerful stomp of his right foot, he shot forward like an arrow from a fully drawn bow, slicing through the air and slashing at the necks of 2 drowners. Slash slash, thick blood spurted from the severed wounds, and 2 drowners died instantly. Immediately, Alan held his sword in his left hand to guard his front and swiftly extended his right index finger. Agni sign. Heat surged from near his heart, flowed through his right hand, and erupted outward. The shockwave mixed with high temperatures not only made 2 approaching drowners stumble but also ignited the mucus on the leading drowner's body with a few jets of flame. Although drowners are representatives of water element monsters in alchemy, the mucus they secrete is highly flammable. Before the burning drowner could be incinerated to death, Alan ended its life with a swift slash. Taking advantage of the next drowner's trembling fear of the flames, the Witcher apprentice danced around it, spinning half a circle. A flash of silver, and a head slid off its neck. 1 drowner had overcome its fear of flames forever. 3 drowners remained. These monsters were still disoriented by the sudden flames on their companion. The Witcher apprentice seized the opportunity. Quickly alternating his steps, he inserted himself into the center of the 3 drowners in just a few strides. His blue cat-like pupils slightly dilated, and in an instant, Alan calculated the angles and swung his sword. A silver arc traced a smooth curve. Clang, the sound of the silver sword being sheathed echoed, and only then did the 3 monster heads seem to react, sliding off their necks. Black-red filthy blood spurted from the severed surfaces. By the clear river, the stench was unbearable and nauseating. The battle ended in less than 5 minutes from start to finish. Skilled and efficient. Ding. Monster Group Drowners Level 6 terminated. Reward calculation. Overcoming enemies. Basic rating D. Defeating more with fewer +1. D+. Decapitation Intimidation +3. C+. Final rating. C+. Loot obtained. Drowner Heart Extract 7. Small Experience Orbs 7. Drowner Treasure Chests 2. Hunting Task. Drowner's Eye. Killed drowners 189 out of 200. Task reward. Unknown. Clap clap clap. Alan followed the sound and saw Vesemir clapping and walking towards the river bank. In terms of hunting drowners, even I can't be faster than you. No wonder you're called the Drowner Slayer. Master Vesemir. Alan called out helplessly. Ever since the Witcher Master heard someone call Alan by that nickname, he had been teasing him about it from time to time. Is Drowner Slayer considered a title of honor? It doesn't even qualify as a proper nickname. Alright, I won't say it anymore. Vesemir shook his head, looked up at the sky, and said, "It's getting late. Pack up, let's head back." In the afternoon, Vesemir did not participate in the hunt. The Witcher Master only used his at least level 4 tracking skills to point Alan in the right direction. The subsequent tracking, exploration, hunting, and handling were all done by Alan. In fact, with Alan's double tracking skills, he didn't even need Vesemir to point the way. The Witcher apprentice had already gained the ability to hunt drowners independently. So, while handling the materials, Alan casually mentioned, "Master Vesemir, do you think I am capable of hunting drowners on my own now?" Vesemir nodded and said, "I don't think any Witcher can say you can't. At least in hunting drowners, I couldn't do better than you. There's hope." Alan felt a surge of joy in his heart and said, "Then from tomorrow, you don't need to come out with me. I can go alone." "No. Vesemur's tone was unwavering as he decisively rejected Alan's request. Why? Alan asked. I'm your mentor, I need to be responsible for your life. As the sun set, golden sunlight slanted over the wide-brimmed black hat. The sharp and handsome face, with eyes obscured by shadows, looked determined and stubborn. Familiar with the Witcher Master, Alan knew this was an unconvincible expression. So, with a sigh in his heart, Alan lowered his head and continued handling the drowner materials. Without Vesemur, even if Alan was familiar with the guards at the gate, he wouldn't be able to leave Kaer Morhen. Or, even if he managed to sneak out once, what about the next time? Unless he left the wolf school for good, but once Vesemur found out, he would lose even his current hunting opportunities. As for leaving the wolf school and wandering far away, Alan wanted to leave the castle, not to avoid the trial of the grasses. He already had an external cheat, so why would he need to escape? How could he not pass the trial and become a legitimate Witcher? He was the miracle child, destined to save the world. Snip, the last drowner tongue was cut off and placed into the material bag. Alan pulled out the hunting task and took a look. There were 11 drowners left to complete the task, which could be done in another day. If it weren't for the hunting task taking up Alan's task slots, his small experience orb count would be at least a fifth higher. Unfortunately, only one task could be triggered at a time. Without completing this task, Alan couldn't trigger other tasks. The Witcher apprentice glanced at the unknown task reward and sighed, thinking, maybe tomorrow, the Monster Hunter Handbook will give me a surprise.